Morning, everyone. Well, it's almost 10 o'clock, so let's make a start. I'd like to begin by welcoming those members of the public or press who have joined us today, either in person or watching via the live stream to this meeting of the Communities, Social Mobility and Inclusion Committee at New Shire Hall in Alconbury Weald. The County Council allows filming and photography at its meetings, so please feel free to take pictures, tweet or blog during the meeting, but could I please request that members of the committee and the public turn their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place. There is no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, please leave by the nearest marked fire exit and assemble in the car park. Hopefully that won't happen because we'll all be freezing, among other things. And item 1 is apologies for absence and declarations of interest. Nick.
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Nethsinger and substituted by Councillor Kindersley. Councillor Billington is substituted by Councillor Gardner, and Councillor Goodliff is substituted by Councillor Boulat, and Councillor Prentice is going to be arriving late. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any declarations of interest at all from anyone? Steve?
Chairman, no, an additional apology. I've just had an email from Councillor French. She's not well, so she's sends her apologies. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Hope Councillor French is better soon. So anybody wish to declare an interest at all? Nope. Okay, so item 2 is minutes of our meeting on the 1st of November and the minutes action log. Nick?
No, sorry, Chair, I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Oh, sorry. Anybody have any questions at all on those minutes of the action log? Morning, Doug. No, okay, thank you. Yeah, so I see no objections, so we'll sign them as approved if everyone is content. Thank you. Item 3, public questions and petitions. Do we have any of those at all, Nick?
No, thank you, Chair. There are no questions or petitions.
That's great. Thank you very much. So we'll go to item 4, which is the review of draft revenue and capital business planning proposals. That's page 13 to page 70. And that's for the years 2023 to 2028. Paul, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This paper, as you indicate, sets out the business planning proposals both for revenue and capital for the medium term, for the financial business plan period of 2023 to 2028. And there are a number of recommendations of the committee, which I'll come back to at the end. There have been a number of developments since we last reported to committee, and these are set out in the overview, including and the evolving context on further development of the business plan and to address the gaps in the overall council budget, the identification of further cross-council savings to address that, the key assumptions that underline the business plan, which obviously sets out how we spend our resources and achieve our visions and objectives, the legal requirement we have to set a balanced budget, the fact the paper now reflects that the Chancellor made an autumn statement in November and also flags that the council has suffered from a long-term period of underfunding compared to other councils. At 1.5, the budget gaps over the medium term that were previously presented to committee are set out in a table. But since then, there has been a significant amount of work that officers have identified further savings and some income generating opportunities, and those revised gaps are now presented at 1.6. And what they show is a gap in the budget plan for the year 2023-24 of just under 13 million, 1.89 million, with a cumulative gap over the 5 years of the business plan till the end of financial year 27-28 of 86 million. So obviously a significantly challenging financial situation for the council, and 1.7 sets out that at the time of writing this paper, the full impact of the Chancellor's autumn statement was not yet known. So there are some estimates, and these are all estimates, and some of the finances that underpin this paper will not be fully quantified until we receive our finance settlement on the 21st of December. And some of those assumptions are set out in the following paragraphs, including the assumption made on the amount of council tax levied to come up with these calculations. That section one finishes with an outline that even with the work that's been done to reduce the budget gap in year, there is still a significant challenge in 23, 24 and ongoing years. So any savings that are identified need to be sustainable and not of a one-off nature. Section 2 does talk about, and I won't go through in detail, does talk about some of the things the Chancellor said in the autumn statement and sets out some of the things that will or could potentially impact on that final settlement that we will receive in December, including flexibility on council tax rates, rising minimum wage, and a number of the considerations, which I won't go through in detail. You'll be delighted to hear. Sections 3 talk about how the revenue budget process for the entire council is built and sets out the tables there. We have finance colleagues on hand if there are any questions about that process or the figures within them, and the same is section 4 for capital. Section 5 sets out and reminds members that this business planning process has undertaken a triple bottom line approach. And then that triple bottom line approach aims to introduce a balanced decision-making process in which social and environmental, social and environmental as well as financial factors can be taken into account. Section 6 then moves on to the COSMIC specific elements of the budget and reminds members at section 6.4, as we reported in November, that there were a number of complex and interrelated pressures and risks relating to the COSMIC budget, especially the reversal of a temporary investment of 1.354 million in Think Communities and the impact of some legacy savings targets from the now disestablished Communities and Partnership Directorate, and also importantly the funding arrangements for the activities of the County Anti-Poverty Hub. 6.8 sets out progress to date, and the legacy savings targets initially levied at £650,000. We met and found £500,000 of those for a combination of savings and income generating targets, but there were £150,000 of legacy savings. Having looked at those again and in full, we do not believe that any further savings in those services would have not led to a reduction in service levels to the public. That is important because the rules in which those savings targets were adopted by full council at the last budget setting process said that was a requirement, that there should be no reduction. Therefore, those legacy savings targets, or the gap in them of £150,000, has been removed from the COSMIC budget, and they will be met elsewhere in the council's budget. So that's referenced in table 3 above in the overall council budget table, reversal of previous year's committee savings. That's at the bottom of paragraph 6.8. So that is no longer, those legacy savings targets are no longer an issue for COSMIC. As reported in November, one of the issues I've just mentioned meant that our Think Community service was not invested in on a recurrent basis. The initial service model we looked at that for Think Communities and Youth in Communities required a cost, a staff revenue cost of £940,000. Available resource was £376,000, leaving a shortfall of £563,000. We have sought to address this by looking at further integration of our Think Communities and Youth in Communities service. We believe that will maximise the knowledge, abilities and skills in both teams to bring them together. And on that basis, we've reduced the shortfall from £563,000 to £234,000. We've made a business case for revenue to cover that, and that will put the Think Communities and Youth in Communities new joint service, should this be agreed by committee at full council as part of the budgeting setting process and subject to consultation. That will put it on a firmer footing and be funded from core budgets from this year onwards. That is a net zero impact to the council as a whole, because a balancing figure of that £234,000 will fall under the remit of strategy and resources and will be saved elsewhere. The design principles that we have looked at in setting out for the integration of the Youth and Communities and Think Communities service are set out at 6.15. But at 6.16 onwards, there are some other difficult reflections that we have had to make based on the reversal of that 1.354 million. It wasn't only funding, I think, community service, and the bullets there at 6.16 set out things in which we feel we were no longer able to undertake. That includes our direct provision of SCAMS work. That is not to undervalue the work SCAMS teams can do and the importance of SCAMS work, but we are talking about the direct provision and directly council funded SCAMS work as it is currently operated. And there is an error there. Apologies, members. It is not a 3-month consultation period. Staff changes as part of this and any other council-wide proposals will be statutory, and that will be 45 days most likely, given the numbers that are likely to be affected. The 3-month period here refers to the period between the new year when consultations will launch and whatever the implementation looks like at the end of March for the new financial year. So apologies for that sloppy drafting. But during that period, so during that whole period, we will undertake some work to look at alternative models of delivery, not least with the members of a SCAMS partnership. Similarly, work on time credits. Again, it's our direct delivery that we are seeking to recommending that we withdraw from here rather than questioning the value of time credits per se. The operation of the Cultivate Cambridgeshire Fund, which is fully funded from the Reverse Thinking Agency's investment, and the operation of the Community Engagement Vehicle, which we believe to be approaching the end of its useful life and has become very expensive to maintain, and frankly would probably be retired out of any budgetary issues facing it. 6.17 points out that the work of the National Citizen Service in our youth in community service is fully externally funded and not impacted, and the post of the Armed Forces Covenant Officer is grant funded for next year and therefore not at risk or impacted in the coming year. 6.19 talks about the anti-poverty hub and the cost of the staffing model. That was not recurrently funded at all. Since previous report, the autumn budget statement did announce an extension of the Household Support Fund for 2023-24. However, no detail on the extension of the scheme has been announced, so we have no certainty on how much that will be. When that is announced, it may be that we can cover our staff costs through the administrative element we are allowed to claim from the Household Support Fund, but the possibility of changes of allocation cannot be discounted. Government has in the past mooted that that allocation may be changed based on relative deprivations. Therefore, the council, we still recommend that we pull forward non-ring-fenced money for unspent in our budgets next year to fund the anti-poverty hub. Then there are some very specific issues regarding libraries and coroner service, which haven't particularly changed with regard to the previous paper. At 6.23 though, the good news that we have found funding for the business and intellectual property centres, which provide startup support to businesses. Due to reach the end of the grant funding period, we have used working together with Cambridgeshire Skills funding on 1-year basis, I think, which is a good indication of the closer working of skills libraries and communities, and a benefit that we've seen there, an early benefit of that approach. That is not sustainable though in terms of Cambridgeshire Skills being able to fund it, so the BPIC, as it's called, those centres will adapt their delivery model, and we have been talking about to the combined authority about access to adult education funding, and the adaptation of the delivery model will allow them to do that. I won't talk about the detail in the coroners and registration services. I think they were as is per the last meeting. There are some referrals to the capital programme at 7.4.1, the libraries capital schemes. There is libraries capital available from Section 106 money, that legal agreement to mitigate the impact of new developments. But a number of the projects do not currently have start dates. So even though we've reached agreement with developers on sites, the projects don't have start dates based on planning and start of building issues. So therefore, they do not appear in the finance tables. That does not mean that Section 106 money is not available for new library developments in proposed sites. There's also a recommendation with regard to the community fund. as it's called here, but previous what we know as the Communities Capital Fund. That original 5 million, as members well know, some elements remain unallocated. So an estimated 1.7 of the original allocation needs to be rephased into 22-23. That does not mean there is 1.7 million available for allocation. That means that some projects which have already been allocated have not started. The amount available for allocation is much lower than that, about 700,000. So we'll go back to the recommendations. Which, apologies, I've just lost because I've got this on a very large paper. I'm going to get there eventually. Thank you very much. So the recommendations are to note the progress made today and the next steps for the business plan, comment on any of the savings proposals, endorse the proposed changes to the capital programme within the remit of the committee, and specifically there are some update figures on fees and charging, and that fees and charges will be applied locally for the registration service fees as well across 24-25. I'll leave it there, Chair, because I've waffled on enough.
Thank you. Hilary, you want to come in?
Thank you, Paul. I just wanted to sort of respond a little bit with a bit of an overview of it, really, and just sort of reiterating some of the plain language, because we get caught up, I think, quite obviously all of us, in quite councily language. I'm gonna start by looking at 1.2 on the overview, which says that the fiscal event in September 22 was due to a previous government. It wasn't due to a previous government. It's due to this government. And when we say budget gap, it sounds like something quite simple that just hasn't quite met up, but actually it's chronic and colossal central government underfunding. And we have, thank you to our officers who are all working in the public sector because they want to make a positive difference, as do we, as councillors who've put ourselves forward to represent our residents and communities across Cambridgeshire. But this has real human cost at a point when we're in crisis with the climate emergency, with the cost of living emergency, with mental health and isolation increasing across, for our residents across Cambridgeshire. I just wanted to note that it's been devastating, I think, for us all to have to work on this. There's been some really fantastic creative thinking around integrating services and working with partners. But I just wanted to note the human cost to this and how, I'm sure that we're all feeling that. Thank you.
Thank you, Hilary. Very well said. Steve.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't often take issue with Hilary, but it was the previous government. The government changed after that fiscal event, so it is correct. But no surprise, Chairman, I just wanted to raise some issues on 616. Disappointed to see the scams work item and the risk of it being withdrawn. Scams are increasing, not decreasing. And one would have thought we would engage with partners on the alternatives before putting it forward as a saving rather than after. So I'm hoping that conversation will happen before it comes to the budget meeting in February, so that we actually know whether that work will continue or not before the decision is made. So and the other issue I just wanted to raise is the operation of the Cultivate Cambridgeshire Fund. I think all of us involved in that fund have recognised how valuable it is, certainly valuable for building community resilience and eventually for decentralisation. So it's very much a backward step that I would regret if that fund does go. So just wanted to note those points, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. We'll follow up on the scams issue and can consult with partners and see what we can do with that. That's a very, very good point. Alex?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions and a comment. Of course, like every other committee, this is really depressing reading. And I hate the term difficult decisions. I think it's really overused in politics, but I think like this year, councils across the UK are facing some very, very difficult decisions, and councils of all political colors, really. So, you know, when we say about commenting and endorsing recommendations, I think like a lot of us would be endorsing really reluctantly those recommendations, because we know why some of the savings are necessary to address the chronic lack of underfunding. But at the same time, it's really difficult for me to sit here and actually say I endorse in the real meaning, in the real sense of the term, I endorse those recommendations. I know why it's necessary, but I'm not, you know, very happy about it. I wanted to say a positive thing to start with. Well, I started right with a negative thing, but I want really to welcome the triple bottom line approach. I know this has been a lot of officers and members have been working on this for a long time, so I am really happy to see it in the reports at this committee and other committees as well. And I think it's particularly important for the COSME committee, especially around the social and environmental impacts of our decisions and the projects that are going on in this committee, and especially linked to your community wealth building models for many of those projects. I'm equally concerned about the scams work that Councillor Criswell mentioned. In my division in Abbey, there has been a lot of positive feedback about that work. I think it tends to, not necessarily, but in a lot of areas of high deprivation, there are a lot of people who are targeted by those scams now. So I'm also interested to see if there are any other alternative ways to fund this work, or like any ways that could be explored, because I think it's been very valuable for my residents, and I'm sure others will agree with that. And on the Think communities, I think it's really important to preserve this kind of community work and youth work. And I'm wondering, in this context of having to address those huge budget gaps, whether we can explore even better partnerships with not-for-profit organizations, because, you know, alongside my council duties, I do work in the youth and migration sector. So I know there's not a lot of comparatively, but there is quite a bit of philanthropic funding. There are many charities, youth charities, that the council already works with some of them. So I wonder if that kind of relationship could be developed further, because if we can't potentially fill some of the gaps in the provision or connect with some communities, maybe a better relationship with some of the charitable sector, especially on youth, the youth side of the sector could be fruitful in the longer term to address some of those, you know, those budget challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Some very good ideas, and you picked on the point that Councillor Criswell made about the scams funding. Claire.
Thank you. I've got 2 points. And the first one is a question concerning 2.6, the reforms to adult social care. That paragraph is quite sort of packed and quite difficult to unpack. And I'm just not sure about the uncertainties. There seem to be an awful lot of uncertainties, and maybe you could just go through that and explain it to us. And then the last sentence, it remains to be seen what the local allocations for these amounts are. I mean, at the beginning, you're saying, I think, that there is less uncertainty, but at the end, you're saying there's more uncertainty because we don't know what the allocations will be. Maybe if you could just talk us through that a bit more in detail, that would be helpful. And then just to pick up what Councillor Bulak was saying in terms of Think Communities, it's certainly regrettable that there will need to be some drawing back of that service, but maybe there could be greater exploration of working with districts and community development areas of the district work that's going on. Thanks.
Thank you, Claire. Sue, did you want to come back on Claire's comments?
Yes, thank you. Just on the questions on 2.6, and we've got Claire here from the finance team as well, if Claire can add any more detail. So my understanding is around the adult social care reforms, that whilst reference was made to them within the autumn statement and in relation to funding figures that would be available for adult social care, there's also an indication that the delay, that the reforms we were anticipating would be delayed, but the absolute detail of where those broad announcements in the autumn statement would actually land with respect to this council, that's where we don't yet have clarity, and that's where the settlement agreement that we will receive on the 21st of December should give us the clarity locally for what that means in terms of a contribution to us and the detail of that. Obviously that will be discussed in detail in Adults Committee, but that's my understanding in terms of the response to the questions, which is not a lot of detail, but I'm sure if Claire can add any more, and then if we want a further clarification, we can seek that outside of the committee meeting and send that through to members if that's helpful. But Claire, thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Sebastian and then Ros.
Thank you. Did you want Claire to come in first?
Yeah, sorry, Sebastian. Claire, sorry. Thank you.
Sorry, we had a Claire and Claire confusion there, didn't we? Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sue. Yeah, there isn't much I can add actually, and it was more or less what Sue said last that I was going to add, but she got to that before I spoke, which was unfortunately my remit doesn't cover adults. I cover children, social care, as well as communities. But I can go back and get some further clarification from adults colleagues after this meeting. There are definitely some of them here today, so I can go and speak to them. But yeah, I think the long and short of it is it is still quite unknown, and we do expect further clarification, as Sue explained. But what we do know is that we are going to be able to have that adult social care levy, as we have had in previous years, as a social care authority. But yeah, aside from that, unfortunately, there's a lot more questions than there are answers on that one.
Yes, thank you. I think that was really my main point, is that we've got so much uncertainty. The fact that the social care reform has been delayed until 2025, and we're still not sure about how that gap is going to be filled. And I think that's, in a way, that's what you're saying in that paragraph, but it's perhaps a bit dense the way, and I can understand why, because it is such a complicated circumstance.
Thank you, Claire. Sebastian.
Thank you, Chair. 3 points. The first, in relation to scams. I work in retail finance world, banks, building societies, and so on. There's been a very significant increase in the level of activity by banks, building societies, and so on, in order to avoid customers falling prey to the ever-increasing number of scams that are out there. So it might be worth leaning on them to a certain extent, because they all have corporate social responsibility targets and so on. And, not least, there are local building societies. The second point I want to make is, as the council's a member on the Armed Forces Covenant Board, members are not terribly engaged with the Armed Forces Covenant, generally speaking, but it is a very significant commitment by the County Council to veterans and their families and communities. And I very heartily commend our officer, Tommy Kelly, who does just the most extraordinary amount of work, from working with individuals, but also working with communities, and in particular in the north of the county, has been instrumental in setting up schemes and projects that are designed in the end to help people who are veterans or veterans' families, but also to deliver savings on our services. So I'm really pleased to see that the grant funding continues, and long may it do so. And the last point I'd like to ask is a question which is in relation to the the library capital schemes. Section 106 funding obviously is time limited. So I would want assurance that the slightly nebulous paragraph 7.4.1, which talks about facilities not even being in planning, is not going to mean that that Section 106 money is going to disappear after 5 years if we haven't done anything.
Thank you. I will find more detail on that. The reference is intended to refer to the developments themselves not taking place, rather than the library development within. And of course, you can't really build the library before the development starts, but I'm happy to come back with more detail on that.
I think that's a good point, Sebastian. In fact, Councillor Gardner and I were at a meeting of HDC last night when this similar topic came up, and we discovered that there's an awful lot of money that's sitting on, I mean, not them personally, but you think, well, come on, let's unwind it, let's get some clarity on this and see what we can do. So it's definitely worth a further dig, I think. Ros?
Yes, so obviously this is a budget place that no one wants to be, and whatever decisions are made, they're going to be hard decisions, and we're going to wish that they didn't have to be made. Can I ask, scams work? Can I ask, what is the Scams partnership? I believe the County Council does the heavy financial lifting on this. Who is in the partnership? There's also trading standards, which has a Scams aspect to it. What is going on in Scams? How are we working with other partners? What is the situation?
So there was a reorganisation in trading standards in about 2017 when some of their anti-scams work was taken and put into the community's directorate. So the director, obviously it's related, but some of the direct heavy lifting, if you like, around the scams work is not done in trading standards in this area. It is in some other authorities, but not here. So we have a small anti-scams team of about 2 whole-time equivalents who support the Scams partnership. There is a service level agreement, I believe, with the National Scams Service that is not funded. And it's not funded for anyone, but we still have a service level agreement by which we go and contact people who have been victim of scams already, because the evidence says that if you've been a victim of scams, you're likely to be a victim of another one. And so they go out and do some of that work alongside, very often, adult social care and sometimes the police as well. So they can be a conduit for that activity, but they're not delivering that activity alone in many cases. And we'll call that secondary prevention in old public health terms. That's where something's already happened and you want to stop it getting worse. There's also some primary prevention that's done through the anti-scams partnership, such as circulating issues of scams that might be awareness of scams to the general population, scams that might be very popular and prevalent in the community at that particular time. And that is shared through the partnership. The partners come together, they share what's available, and then they go away again. And I think what we're saying here is we carry a lot of the load of that Scams partnership. We effectively fund its activity, and there are some partners, if you put into a popular search engine of your choice, who's the membership of that Scams partnership, you will see there are some of the kind of bodies that Councillor Kindersley was referring to. So I think one of the approaches would be to go back to the partnership, as has been suggested, and say the council really isn't in a position to currently fund all of this activity in and of itself, and how might we do this in a different way together. So, you know, one of those issues might be a better co-funding model, but there might be other ways we could do it, especially around the primary prevention earlier. So we'll be talking to partners in the Scams partnership about the primary prevention. We'll be talking to colleagues in adult social care and others around that more secondary element that's a bit more face-to-face.
Thank you both. Doug.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, thank you for this. It makes both uplifting reading and depressing reading at the same time. You see the good work that we've been doing and where the outcomes are, and we see where we're heading to. And as Councillor Boulat said, it's difficult when you're sitting there looking at something that you really don't want to endorse, but actually the reality of the world we live in is somewhere along the line someone has to. And as I've said in other places plenty of times, I don't like this any more than you do, but it might be the only thing we've got on the table, so it's very difficult. The thing that I find increasingly frustrating, and it's happened in all the years I've been on councils, is the fact that we sit here quite late in the year and we're yet again waiting for the government to announce really what its allocations are. Members have said, where have we got any certainty? And the truth is we haven't until we know what that is. It creates real problems, and I've seen it years and years when the economy was in a better state than it's in now, sort of financial gymnastics at the last minute to try and make what we're allocated fit. And I imagine for the offices at the minute, this has got to be, if not a nightmare, certainly something approaching that, where, you know, you've got all the other pressures of, you know, post-COVID, the problems of the economy at the minute, inflation, the energy problems, and really not knowing, as usual, what the budget allocation is going to be. So I think it's a good body of work. This is as far as it goes. I appreciate what Councillor Kindersley said about the scams. I mean, there's certainly more work being done in the financial sector now. I know it frustrates me, but actually it's for my own benefit. When I try and make a payment from my bank account now, it literally says, do you want to pay this? Do you want to pay it again? And do you want to pay it again? There's no longer hit the button and it goes. So what we've got to try and do, and possibly in conjunction with the financial areas, because it's that area where a lot of the problems are, is encouraging people, especially the elderly. I've noticed from my mother, she still falls into these, oh, I had this really nice man ring, all this lovely and his manners, and, you know, but that's not the point, you know, trying to emphasize to do that. But I cannot get her to do her banking online, or do it properly online. And I think that's where people leave themselves exposed. So I think it's important to do that. On the library's work, I'm not too concerned there, I must admit, because I think, if I'm thinking right, the 106 5 years only runs from when the development starts, not from when the planning permission is given. So I think we're relatively safe on that. But I think on the rest of it, as a good body of work has been done in the past, and it's to continue as best it can. And whilst I'm not happy with this, I can't see too many alternatives to it. So thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Doug. Just to sum up, unless anybody else wants to make any points, and this is obviously very sobering reading, as we've said, and none of us wanted to be in this place. Very tough decisions, and our team do an excellent job. Councillor Criswell said the Cultivate CAMS project has been very good, very successful. Youth and Communities teams mentioned here. I've worked with them quite closely recently. They're superb. So it is very tough out there, no question about that. But thank you to Paul for preparing the report. I'm going to move to recommendations. Are we happy to take those on block or individually? Take them on block, all on block, okay. There seems to be a consensus on this, but if anybody has any objections, would you like to raise your hands? No, okay, that is, you're abstaining. Thank you, Steve. You abstain as well. Well, let's take a vote, so probably best. All those in favour? Thank you, and then any abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. So that is carried. Thank you for your contributions, everyone, and for your ideas. So item 5 is decentralisation in action. That's you again, Paul.
It's actually Sue, Chair.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Chair. So good morning, everyone. Earlier this year, this committee discussed and agreed a set of principles for decentralisation that included having local services responding to the needs of local people, service design that is informed by residents, greater ability for communities to influence decisions that affect them, and ensuring that we are accessible to residents. So today's report builds on the previous work of the committee and gives some examples of where these principles are being applied. So obviously the report has quite a lot of detail in it, but I'll just highlight one or two of those examples. So we've got examples ranging from the local nature-led recovery, sort of where groups are supported to manage and enhance green spaces within their communities. The anti-poverty work's already been referred to today, and obviously not only do we deliver the Household Support Fund, but we deliver through a range and extensive network of partners other support that enables people to be assured that they're getting all the help that they possibly can over and above the Household Support Fund to help them through what is clearly going to be a very difficult winter. The Care Together programme I wanted to draw attention to. I think it's a really innovative piece of work here where we're supporting voluntary and paid opportunities for people to work within their community to support people to live at home and to remain at home. And so there are other examples in the paper as well, which you will have read. Since September, in terms of progress in this area, obviously there's been reference made to the reorganisation across the council and the creation of a new directorate called Strategy and Partnerships, which I think very significantly has brought the libraries, communities and skills service into the corporate centre of the organisation. And that is really already providing a set of opportunities to link those services directly into this activity. So just some examples of that is the libraries and skills service are looking at how they can wrap around the Care Together work and support that, particularly in terms of obviously the skills development and the support for individuals wanting to set themselves up as a business. We're also looking at the skills offer for young people in the 16 to 19 age group and looking at how that links into the youth communities work. Paul's already referenced the fact that the libraries have managed in the last few months to secure funding, which will mean they'll be able to retain their business startup support service, which is really encouraging. And obviously plans, as Paul's referenced, to look to the combined authority to sustain that. So those conversations are ongoing. And even in the last couple of weeks, we're developing discussions with both colleagues in children's services and adult services, particularly around how the libraries and skills service can support activity such as the activity and family hubs. the neighbourhood work that the integrated care system has committed itself to through its strategy, and where the Care Together initiative can move to elsewhere in the county. At the moment, the focus is very much in East Cambs. So the work is ongoing, it's going to develop, and what this report commits us to is to be able to report back to you regularly on developments in this area of activity. We're also looking at how we can best monitor this activity to ensure that it meets the principles that you endorsed earlier in the year. And so the committee is asked to note this report, including that commitment to report back to you regularly, and also with reference to the capital fund. And Paul, in his budget overview, said there is a sum of around 700,000 remaining within the capital fund, and the proposition, which will require further exploration, but if you endorse this as a direction of travel, the proposition is to look at that remaining capital fund and see how that can support the Care Together initiative, with a focus on improving accessibility in public spaces and in public buildings for older people, people who may be frail or may have mobility issues, people who are suffering from dementia, so that we can actually make our spaces more accessible. So that's a very much a proposal about how we could refocus the use of the remaining capital in that fund. So I'll pause at that point. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue. Philippa and then Henry.
Thank you, Chair. I was delighted with this paper. It speaks to me for all the years I've spent in councils and out of them and then back in, because it is the stuff of life of local government. There was a time when we could afford to do more ourselves, but obviously we've always worked with partners. And I think having come through the pandemic, those of us who weren't aware of some of the activities in our neighbourhoods are now aware of them, and have been working with partners that might be old ones and new. And it's in Cambridge, obviously, we've learned early on that a city surrounded by another district council does need to get together. We have the swimming pools, they have the people who wanted to swim, etc. So we've been, in Cambridge City, it's been happening a long time. And I see we're mentioned here in terms of being well versed in the difficulties as well as the benefits of this sort of decentralization. I was particularly pleased that it's fairly vague. I would like to call it insofar as it is an enabling attitude. If we have decentralization in our ways of working and our ways of thinking, then I'm sure we can deliver better for individuals and avoid waste of our precious resources, human as well as financial. It was interested to see some of the examples, things like youth work. It's familiar territory to all of us councillors, how well we can work with the voluntary sector. The caring together, clearly there's scope there. In Trumpington, I always bang on about that. Only yesterday I got together with the community centres manager, who is an employee of the City Council, and with my cosmic hat on, going through some helpful remarks from Gary Porter of Libraries, whereby we were wanting to be good partners, working together and making the most of any income streams we could get hold of to put things on in the library, etc. And could then tell my grandson that there might be a place where his band could perform because of the library friends. And that sort of to and fro that we can do with our neighbours and friends is great. I would hope that where we are giving examples, we were expecting things like youth and communities and integrated care. In future, I hope we will be able to read a successful case history of better buses, of franchising and cooperating, empowering and listening that enables us to address transport poverty, because that is, I think, so important. Well, I know it is so important to getting young people to the courses they need, to the new jobs they've been offered. Transport that is accessible to as many people as possible, going where they need to go, is, I think, so important that I want to know that there's a agenda planning. It will be in a report in years to come to show how we've worked with people in a decentralized way. I'm just looking for those three words. I'm sorry to flatter at you, but you had the words empower, enable and think and listen to residents. Now, we know that you never get those in the right order. What you do is do them again and again. And it's this empowering so that people can actually come to a meeting like this, hear what we're up to, have a say if they need to. They don't have to watch it always on screen, though that is very enabling as well. And we can then also be listening. And that sort of collaborative approach, making the most of what resources we can get hold of from central government and from elsewhere, is going to be so key for the future. And I just hope, as I say, we'll get a better buses framework in here in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippa. Henry, and then Sebastian.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking to 2.9 in the report, where it gives us some examples of decentralisation in action, and specifically the section 2.9.5, which links back to the recommendation for this paper, relating to aligning the Care Together programme with the whatever it's called now, the Cambridgeshire Priorities Capital Fund. As someone who has lived through the what then was the Communities Capital Fund, I do know that the good work that it has done, and fully endorse the thrust behind the recommendation in the agenda. I think including the Care Together programme in alignment with that fund can only be a positive thing. So I would support that recommendation in the paper. However, going back to the beginning of this item, which is 2.9.1, whilst I do recognise the Local Highways Improvement Scheme is an example of decentralisation, I'm not too sure this committee can take too much credit for that, given the fact it sits within the highways remit, albeit I do recognise it is an example of that. So just to make those points, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henry, Sebastian, and then Hilary.
Thank you, Chair. To take on what Councillor Batchelor has just set out in relation to the Care Together programme, I'm aware that there are a number of warm hubs that are being set up across, I hope, Cambridgeshire, but certainly South Cambridgeshire and Cambridge City. And so I do wonder whether there are places that would be suitable as warm hubs which are not being considered because they aren't accessible as much as they could be. And to that end, I wonder whether officers could have a quick look at that, because obviously we are being asked to agree a recommendation that there'll be further information coming forward in March 2023. For some people, that will be closing the stable door after the horse has frozen. So that's the first point I want to make. The second is a bit more general, and I've been sort of over the last 24 hours wondering how to place it. So I'll just do it on a sort of like parochial basis. My division is 13 parishes, and it's split three ways. A third of them look to Cambridge City for their services, a third of them look to Royston and Hertfordshire for their services, and a third look to places like Biggleswade, Sandy, Bedfordshire for their services. And in the 2.10 system enablers to support decentralisation, there's a lot of discussion about open data and the use of data and so on. And what I want to highlight to officers is that data from Cambridgeshire itself, of course, is vital and useful, and it's going to be on what everything is based. But I would not want to see that data from other neighbouring authorities is simply ignored because it's not us. Because for very many of my residents, it actually is us. And I'm sure Councillor Batchelor has the same issue with Suffolk, and I'm sure that many other members do with Norfolk and Northamptonshire and our other neighbouring counties and districts. So I don't know whether there is any feasible way of taking that data, I'm using that in sort of capital letters, into account. And the reason I wasn't sure how to frame this exactly is because it has very significant impacts. So if your GP surgery is out of county, you don't have the same kind of access to Addenbrooke's that Cambridgeshire residents have, even though you live in Cambridgeshire. And of course, we have the situation that Councillor Slatter has just highlighted. You know, unless my 16 to 18-year-olds going on to further education, A-levels and so on, have access to a private car or can cycle to a station, they aren't able to access further education in any kind of simple, cheap, economic way. And that leads to all sorts of consequences, which I'm sure you're only too well aware of, for communities and residents within them. So I think my appeal is to think broader in terms of decentralization. It isn't just us.
Absolutely, Sebastian. Did you want to come back on those questions, Sue? Thank you.
I think they're just really important points, and just want to say, yes, thank you for raising those. And I think the point around data, certainly in terms of working more widely across the public sector in terms of amassing data in Cambridgeshire, is something that we're pressing hard on, but particularly because of the good work we did together with the system off the back of the pandemic. But I think that inter-county cross-border work is really vital. And yes, of course, appreciating we're not the Highways Committee, but obviously we're trying to capture here council-wide activity, but obviously the issue around transport and the challenges around transport are well made, and obviously we'll be in touch with colleagues as that progresses and ensure that we reflect that here, because it is a fundamental foundation to the way in which communities can thrive and that people can excel and access activities, employment and education. So thank you.
The Sebastian's point about the warm hubs.
Oh yes, Paul's going to respond to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. We have thought and spoken a lot with district council colleagues about warm hubs. And it's an interesting one. One of the principles of decentralization is people often will do things differently, and there are different approaches to warm hubs across the county. In a couple of the districts in the south, the district councils have commissioned local voluntary sector organisations to run them. City Council are running their own effectively. Huntingdonshire District Council are taking an approach not to set up de novo warm hubs, but to look at places that are already open and available in the community. And I have to say that mirrors our approach. Our approach has been to recognise the value of libraries and to promote that libraries will give you a warm welcome. And what's interesting and important, I think, to note is we're already getting some feedback that there are people who would not set foot in something called a warm hub because of the stigma attached to it, that are very happy to go into a library. This is, of course, capital money as well, and the idea of finding a use for capital to open and keep open warm hubs is a little bit different. So I think there is a space for both places that are already open that offer a warm welcome, such as libraries, and de novo warm hubs where people can access a wider range of services than just keeping warm. And our approach has very much been to offer a route into the Household Support Fund and the Anti-Poverty Hub in those spaces. But I would still actually recommend that the use of this remaining capital in the Capital Fund is in line with our strategic priority of care together rather than necessarily warm hubs. But I can at least assure you we have been looking very carefully at warm hubs.
Thank you very much. Next is Hilary, followed by Doug, followed by Alex.
Thank you. Yeah, just following on from that, really, to in a big shout out for our libraries, and we don't necessarily see equitable working with warm hubs and community support across the county, and so having our libraries, you know, that are everywhere across our county and being able to work on this and develop this and offer this is absolutely critical. And you know, thank you to everybody involved in doing that. I also just really wanted to follow up on some of the importance about transparency as part of deliberative discussion, and just, I mean, we've had, you know, such examples at the moment of mixed messages, I'm going to say, and I think that understanding process and supporting deliberative discussion, you know, really early on is so important, isn't it? And being really using plain language and having that sort of transparency. So a couple of things that I wanted to pick up. We talked about, firstly, so many good things happening here. The Care Together programme, fantastic. The community safety at 2.8. And I just wanted to just note something really, please, Sue. And you said about this commitment to reporting back to committee. So just looking at where that transparency is in place for being able to check back on the triple bottom line, being able to being applied to tendering and commissions, and how that can then be reported back, and how we can continue to assess tenders. And the second one, talking about data as well. And like I said, I'm gobsmacked by misinformation and facts and, clickbait, fake news. And so I'm very keen to have this fact-based data as well as how it can provoke citizen engagement and really get down into sort of some of those hidden insights and where there are gaps in community provision. But, sorry, excuse me, we talked about public sector and cross-sector data sharing. So I'm just going to put in that we know that our NHS services are no longer fully publicly maintained and provided. So just that extra awareness that we have, for instance, commissions going to US organizations that may not have the same sort of data protection in place. And I know that there is like campaign groups and Open Democracy and Foxglove that are really keeping an eye on this, but to be just to be really aware that we're not talking purely about the public sector when we're partnering with and working hand in hand with the NHS. Thank you.
Thank you, Hilary. Doug, followed by.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm not going to repeat a lot of what's been said because I generally agree with the comments that have been made. I think one thing that came out of COVID, if there was anything good about it, was the fact that it was shown that partnership working could happen, not just between the district and the county, but between the county, the districts, and the various community groups that are still there. And those models still exist. And the problem I have with my division, I'm not going to be parochial on this, it just gives you an example of the difference between what you hear from colleagues who've got city and town divisions and rural ones. My 6 parishes that I represent don't have a library. In fact, most of them don't have buses other than on a Monday and a Friday. So we are very much reliant on working with those local groups that exist in those parishes. And I know Paul's been working in Huntingdonshire with Huntingdonshire, and they're supporting some of them. The problem we have is the models are different in each parish. They've all got, some have got sort of a work share type of project, others have got a hub type of one that naturally lends itself. But I think the fact we're supporting them is good. The disappointment I've had is I've had a feedback from a couple of my parishes. Look what Huntingdonshire is doing. Isn't it a shame Cambridgeshire aren't supporting this? I think we've got to get that message over there that it's a partnership work. And I put them right and said, actually, this is something we're doing. It's not a question of come to Cambridgeshire, we'll give you more money. It's actually, the idea is it's funneled through the local services. I think we just need to make sure that's clear. I think the opportunities are there, but drilling down into the parishes and the smaller parishes and villages is really difficult. And one of the problems we have in one of the villages I represent, the vast majority of the population are over retirement age, and it's actually finding them. It's this difficult to reach groups. How do you find the difficult to reach? Because by definition, they're difficult to reach. And with the elderly, a lot of them, we're talking about them, helping them in stay in their homes, but we need that information to be feedback to the groups so those other groups know that they are there. So I think that's important. And the last thing, interesting, Councillor Hassel mentioned it, is bus services for the over 16-year-olds. We've got a position in my division. We've got 4 different secondary schools, 3 of which have a through from age 11 to 18 function, 1 of which stops at 16. And we're now in the position where some of the children, 17 and 18-year-old, are told you've got to get yourself to the nearest town to get on the guided bus to get into Cambridge. And if that nearest town is 4 or 5 miles away and mum and dad have had to go in a different direction to work, it's causing some real issues. So we need to make sure, if we're going to say to people, you have to remain in some form of education to 18, that number one, the education, whatever that may be there, which isn't really our remit, but secondary, the fact you can get there in the first place, because otherwise it creates some real problems. So I've had that flagged up, and it's something we need to deal with, because at the moment there is no statutory provision. I asked the question, got told actually once they get to 16, unless there's a hardship case, which is really hard to prove. I know that there are hardship cases, but the level's really low, in my opinion, to get there. You know, it causes problems. So I'll leave it there because, I say, other than that, I listened to what everyone else has said, and generally online. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Next is Alex, to be followed by Ian.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of comments from me as well. I won't comment on buses. I agree on what has been said on transport. I think at this point I'm a serial complainer on the bus system that we have in the county. On 2.287, the improved decision making in collaboration with districts and city council partners. I know the example given about our engagement with Cambridge City Council and some of the work that has been happening there. But equally in the debate today, we heard many examples of other districts working already towards this decentralized agenda. So I was wondering, how far are we into conversations with the other districts, and was there a particular reason why we mentioned Cambridge City specifically in this? Is it because the conversation is just more advanced in terms of the aligning this decentralization agenda, and what is the feedback from the other districts? Perhaps we haven't heard, I mean, we heard some examples from Huntingdonshire, but like I was interested in general, what is your feedback in terms of how do you see the engagement with the different districts, especially for different stages of working towards decentralization. And I wanted to comment as well on 2.10.2. I find this idea really interesting about establishing this residents panel that is actually representative of the geography and demography of the county. I think it's fair to say that in most of the consultations that we have, and this is both at county and district level and various other bodies that do consultation, of course, is not representative, because if we have, let's say, an online consultation, there will be people who will be more likely to complete this. So I'm in countless discussions about how can we engage more young people, how can we engage ethnic minority communities. And I think we are reaching the stage in debating our democracy that we have to think about the form of consultation, not only the substance of the consultation, because how we're used to the consultation just doesn't seem to reach certain groups. And I say this because I know how much effort officers put in, for example, to engage younger people, and how in every single consultation on, like, you know, from local plans to, like, you know, more controversial recent proposals, we have a real issue actually reaching out certain demographics. So I think we really need to think about this more holistically. But equally, having been myself on the end of being on citizens panels, like on some national policy, I also think this is like a really difficult thing to do. First of all, it's really challenging to make it representative unless we really work with an organization who is an expert in actually identifying a proper representative sample, like a citizens assembly type of model, but also actually empowering people to see the impact of their ideas, because I've been on so many of those citizens panels on various immigration related policies, and none of our ideas make it into the immigration policy we have. And it's like really kind of depressing to sit on a panel and be like, you know, give all our input, and then, you know, at the end of the day, the government will do like whatever they want anyway. And I think like we need to kind of build trust to set the expectations of like how people would actually contribute. And I think we need to think about like who do we work with in terms of the methodology of this. It's a really challenging thing to do, but also in terms of like what themes we actually want input, because if we just have a generic kind of citizens assembly or residents panel, whatever you want to call it, it is like very, very broad. So where do you even start? So actually having like a very kind of thematic and theme specific panel could be good. But yeah, I know this is early stages, but I thought, you know, that's a brilliant idea, but I know how challenging it is to do. And I know how it can end up being unrepresentative as well, and actually replicating the issues that we have, that our consultations are just not representative currently. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. Sue, did you want to come back on Alex's comments and questions?
Just briefly, yes, thank you. I mean, something that isn't, you ask a question about our working with all the districts, and something we don't reference here is the work we've done around the Homes for Ukraine scheme, and where we've had very active kind of engagement with all of the districts county-wide, and that very much builds off the back of the community resilience forum that we had with districts and the voluntary community sector through COVID. So just to assure you that what's in the paper here is illustrative of conversations that are happening at the City Council. We've referenced Huntingdonshire's kind of some of the work we're doing there, but we have those strong relationships. But that said, I think there's the specific discussion discussion around decentralisation and the theme here and the opportunities. Those conversations need to be picked up and developed with districts too. So whilst we have those relationships, I'm confident of those. There is certainly further work, further conversations to have to see how we can take that forward. And I just wanted to say, in terms of the point about considering both the form and the substance of consultation, I think those points are really welcome, and thank you. And I think, yeah, it is a challenging area. You're absolutely right. So we may want to come and have a conversation with you, Councillor Balat, but certainly it's about having a mixed approach. And so if we do deliver the residents panel, it's still that whole range of activities, conversations, ways of engaging to give us an assurance that actually, particularly the voices of people who are not typically heard through those routes, we're starting to hear those voices and understand what people's needs are. So I welcome your feedback on that. That's extremely welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Ian, you're next.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, I would like to endorse precisely everything that's been said by Councillor Kindersley and Councillor Dew. In my particular division, where I cover 25 parish councils, you know, my residents have extreme difficulty getting to doctors' surgeries. Students have difficulty getting school transport, or they can't get a bus. So that means mum or dad have to then take them to a point where they can get a bus to get into school or college in Cambridge or Huntingdon. Under the new bus proposals that we've seen from the Greater Cambridgeshire Partnership, the whole of my division is totally and utterly ignored. You know, if we're going to link up Cambridgeshire, you can't be leaving the whole of West Huntingdonshire totally void of any bus service whatsoever to get people into Cambridge to be able to go to university, college, the hospital or whatever. At the moment, we've got nothing. Now, if we're going to try and even up Cambridgeshire, we've got to be looking at that. And I do think we need to be looking at it now as the GCP are discussing the whole thing of buses and everything else. You know, we can't just improve buses in Cambridge itself. We've got to include the rural areas. Otherwise, people just cannot do the jobs they need to do.
Thank you, Ian. No, you're a great advocate for your parishes, as we see regularly. Anybody else at all? Steve?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just 2 or 3 quick points from me. Totally agree about the buses. I live and represent a rural area, but we really need to lobby the mayor on that, because, of course, I understand we're the only mayoral authority that hasn't managed to come up with a viable bid to government, and that money is available from government to set up a better bus fund. So that needs to happen as soon as possible. Really welcome all the good community work that's going on, Chairman, and of course, you know my past involvement. This has been developing and ongoing for quite a few years now, so good to see that that's continuing. You'll also know, Chairman, I've been a bit frustrated about the decentralisation governance element, so I'm pleased to see we're making progress now, but disappointed it's taken 18 months to say we're going to set up a board and engage with the public, because, you know, that could have happened much sooner. So, you know, let's bring that forward as soon as possible. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Steve. Ros. Oh, I'm sorry, Adela. Sorry, first, Adela.
Yes, I just wanted to endorse what Ian said and Steve said. In Ramsey, we have a situation with buses. Sorry. Yes, and you know, it means that our young people are having real problems getting to schools, colleges. I mean, I've been in touch with the Director of Education about school transport. But if you choose to go to a school outside of the area, there's no free transport. So the pressure is on parents to get their children to the schools. I know it's probably not under the remit of this committee, but I do think it is about the community, and I think we need to be talking with other departments within the county about the situations we're facing in rural areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Dara. That's a very good point. I think was Councillor Kindersley said earlier, if you're living just outside of a particular area, you're going to find it very difficult to access services. You're living in Councillor Dew, who's now disappeared. Councillor Dew's area, you're not going to have a library in your division. You've got to go to St Ives for that. Likewise with Councillor Criswell's area. So very important point. We'll pick that up. Ros? Oh, Claire, sorry. I'll get you eventually, Ros. Claire first.
Thank you, Chair. So better buses, fairly funded as a public service. I think I would agree with what others have said and would say that loud and clear. But my specific point is on 2.8.7 and goes back to what Councillor Bulak was saying earlier. And I was very pleased to hear about the work on Homes for Ukraine. And I know in South Cambs, the District Council has been doing a lot of work there. So I'm glad that we've been working with the District Council. I think there is there will be a different approach across different areas, but maybe there is scope also for a toolkit for working with councils, with district councils, and we've got a good example here about the City Council. I'm sure there's other good working with district councils, and maybe with those experiences, now is possibly time to draw up a toolkit for partnership working. Thanks.
Excellent point, Claire. We will bring that up, I think. We'll take that up. Ros?
Of course, we all want better buses. I mean, it's almost impossible to get to many places by bus. The amount of time it spends to get there is just so onerous, it's impossible. I think everyone in this room, everyone in the county recognizes the issues with buses, and it is absolutely beyond the scope of this committee. But it's not the case that the reasons specified in the overview and scrutiny committees to the combined authority were not that the bid the mayor had made wasn't good enough. It's that we didn't score highly enough on levelling up indices, whatever they are, and also that the county had not shown sufficient commitment to road pricing, active travel, and bus prioritisation schemes. Now, the only one I can think of is the GCP's proposal, which is being attacked. You know, if we could all sit down and talk about this in a really intelligent, calm way and talk about what the limits are, government limits what we can do. There's so many things you can't do with buses. You can't make the money work because as soon as you try to make it try, you've got legislation against you. It is a really, really complex issue. The more you look into it, the more complex it gets. And just to scream that a congestion charge is the worst possible thing, which is what is happening and which is what politically is being revved up, is about the most unhelpful thing to do. So I think everyone in this room would agree that buses are really important, but it would also be very helpful if we could all sit down calmly and recognise what a complicated situation is, how complex it is, how there are no easy answers, how it's going to cost money, and somehow we've all got to come together if we're serious about this, and someone's going to have to pay for it, and it's going to be to an extent. Somewhere in Cambridge, the money is going to have to come, in Cambridgeshire, the money is going to have to come from within the county, because the government's made it pretty clear they're not interested in giving us any money.
Okay, thank you, Ros. That was a very passionate argument you put there, but thank you for that. Anybody else before we move to the recommendations? No. So thank you very much for your contributions, everyone. That's been really good from everybody. And I just wanted to say as well, thanks to Tom Malloy, who's sitting at the back there, for the help that Cambridgeshire Skills have given to the business and intellectual property centres. It's a good element of decentralisation, and that's kept them going. And thank you to Sue and Paul for their really helpful contributions as well. So the recommendations are to note the report and agree that the Cambridgeshire Priorities Capital Fund be strategically aligned with the Care Together programme as set up in section 2.9.5 of the reports. And there seems to be a consensus on that. Any dissent at all? No, thank you. So I see no objection. So we'll take those recommendations as carried unanimously. And then we'll move on to item 6, which is the governance arrangements for Cambridgeshire Skills. Tom, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll do this quickly because obviously I see that you're slightly running over. But Cambridge Skills has sort of changed its position because of the corporate changes in the creation of the Strategic and Partnership Directorate, which we now sit. And Cambridge Skills is no longer arm's length. In reality, it never really became arm's length because of the pandemic. But that means we need to review and alter our governance structures so they better reflect the new world that we find ourselves. And in short, what we are recommending is that the current Board of Governors be stood down and replaced with an advisory board. And this advisory board will be very specific, and it'll be focused on sort of 4 main elements. A, the quality of the provision that we offer, that it's targeted to the right communities and learners within in Cambridgeshire, that our safeguarding bits are all good and sound, and that the resources that we use are fully integrated within the other services that we've now found ourselves aligned with, specifically libraries and think communities. So these changes will sort of enhance and fit alongside the other sort of governance that have already been in place with the council. You know, the Board of Governors was responsible for HR, finance, etc., but there's already robust processes and systems in place to have that covered. So this will enable the advisory board, to have a clear focus on those specific items around quality and the provision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. Philippa, then Sebastian.
Thank you, Chair. I really welcome this report. It took me a little while when I first got onto the county council to realise what Cambridge Skills was, because I would, we look in Cambridge, you've got lots of private tuition and come down and get your A-levels after all in this place and that place. I only realised that it was a county council project a little late on. There were no logos, so as you may know, and certainly Jan French knows because I banged on about it with her, that there wasn't, that the logo didn't appear. It does now, and I welcome that, but it's more than whether the logo shows it, it's whether the practice shows that we are taking young people through, the old vision of Morris, lifetime learning, the village colleges. I know that sometimes if they have to go to sixth form now more than they used to, then there's a difficulty getting there. But the foundations were sound to have village colleges because they also kept people informed and together and learning on all their lives long because they have the adult education. We have got a bit disjointed, and I hope that this governance will help us get it back together, because these individual pupils who we don't want to fall over a cliff or be left stranded because they're older and they no longer have statutory, they don't have statutory rights in the same way. I know that councillors are talking about making school transport part of making things better. And obviously we do need to look at this in the round. And so I really welcome that it isn't arm's length and it's going to be very much in the family. It probably always was, but it needs to be from the outside so people know where to turn to and how we can get together in committees and achieve improvements. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippa. Sebastian, and then Hilary.
Thank you very much. My question is probably unbelievably stupid, but I'm going to put it anyway. I don't understand the connection between the combined authority and the county council in relation to the skills world. And I wonder if you could perhaps separate the threads for me.
Certainly. I think in simple terms, we are funded by the combined authority. So Cambridge Skills receive just over £2 million in the form of the adult education budget in a grant, which we then use to deliver, all of our learning across Cambridgeshire. So in effect, we are commissioned by the combined authority.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much. So what is there is somebody on the combined authority who is designated as the lead member for skills, is there not? So how do they tie into, so how is there a relationship between the two? In other words, we're hearing from you, and presumably the mayor and the combined authority is hearing from them, and perhaps you could expand on that just a bit. I did start by saying this was very dim. I am, you know.
The combined authority has a skills board, which is made up of members from various different locations, and we as a county council have a seat at that as well. And we also have sort of a relationship and contractual management arrangement with officers within the combined authority, just to ensure that we're, you know, doing the right thing.
So I guess my last question is there a bureaucratic duplication of effort at any point?
No, I think we're actually removing one by reducing the Board of Governors into the advisory board, because that was a duplication. I think the key thing that we have some certain freedoms and flexibilities within the funding rules. And I think this is where you as a committee and other officers can sort of help shape how we use those to ensure that the funding is being best used for corporate strategies and plans.
Thank you, Tom. Hilary, and then Claire.
Thank you. Oh, Sebastian, who was it that said, if you're not confused, then you don't understand the situation? I try and console myself with that. The more that I learn, the more, you know, I keep feeling more confused. I really just wanted to say about Cambridgeshire Skills, how much I have loved the responsive work of creating courses in response directly to what residents and communities and businesses need to really underpin our council aims. I think that it's a fantastic, you know, woven in service. I just wanted to pull up one of the words, and I know that I keep repeating about transparency. And in the report, we talk about promoting British values, and I recognise that is an official government term. I'm not so keen on it because it sounds like lawfulness, democracy, and respect is unique to Britain, which of course it's not. So I just wanted to sort of clarify that when Cambridgeshire Skills is as we have to, you know, promoting British values, that these are values of understanding, democracy, and mutual respect, and various faiths and beliefs, and everything that we would, you know, look to promote, which possibly the title undermines, especially when there is so much sort of xenophobic narrative at the moment. Thank you.
I can reassure you that is the case, and British values is something that Ofsted, it's an Ofsted term, come from the DfE, so but we work with it, just as you described.
Thank you, Claire.
Yeah, there is another body involved with skills, isn't there, in the county, and that's the GCP, that also has a skills remit. So I wonder if you're working in any way directly with them. That's one question. A comment, or rather a question, is that we've just been talking about buses and accessibility to courses, and the fact that we are, the rural areas are deprived of bus services. Does that affect you directly? And then a third question on that is about working with schools. How do you interrelate with schools?
So in terms of the GCP, yes, we are. And in terms of buses, I think one of the things that makes us unique as an adult and community learning provider, so it's different from colleges, is that we take our provision to the communities. So we don't really have centres that are our own. We've got a centre in March, but that's a community centre, but we deliver all across the county. We use schools, libraries, community centres, etc., village halls. So again, if there's a demand, we can take it there. We also have a small pot of funding, which is which can be used for things like travel, childcare. So if there are any additional barriers to prevent a person you accessing learning, that is available. Sorry, I forgot, was the third part of your question? Yes, so yes, sorry. Yes, we work with a range of schools. Part of our funding is for something called family learning, which is where we work with the whole family, which are for families that have been identified by schools where the parents could do with additional support to help them support their children through their education. And also we, work with the schools so they can sort of signpost people to us if they've got, people who are new to the UK and need help with their English or, other such things.
Thank you. Anybody else? Philippa and then Steve.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, hello, Tom. I'm Tom's predecessor as chair of the governing board. When the arm's length idea was first mooted and we were set up as a governing board, there was a thought that we could access funding potentially that the county council wouldn't be able to access. Has that become a reality? Are we risking losing any funding? I know we didn't actually gain any from outside, but there was a feeling that we might be able to. So is there a risk that would no longer exist if we taking it back in-house? And the second point was picking up Councillor Kindersley's point with the CPCA. An officer from the CPCA did sit on the board when I was chairing it. Is it intended that somebody from the CPCA will be on the advisory group? Because I think that would be beneficial if they are. So, thank you.
To the latter part of that question, yes, it is recommended that we have someone from the CPA on the board. And in terms of funding, while I can't categorically say we're not sort of risking any loss of funding, I think it's very minimal, and I haven't been able to identify any that we wouldn't be able to access. But I can't say that 100%, but I think it's a really small thing, and we haven't seen any funding that's available that would be excluded because we are part of a local authority.
Thank you. Philippa and then Alex.
Yes, quickly. This is turning into a little bit of a seminar on how local government works, isn't it? And also with a GCP show. Just to mention that I don't know how many of the webinars with the GCP my colleagues have been to. One of the ones I went to was organised by the charities, the Council of Cambridge Charity Voluntary Services, CCVS, I know it as, and there the GCP guy, I think it was Peter Blake, was saying how much he'd learnt in a similar group of the community car organisers. And that's there's a decentralization in practice thing if there ever was, because that has to be very localized and they're all different. And if anything, what was a problem with those in terms of what we experienced in Trumpington was bureaucracy. But I think that the GCP have obviously learned a lot in that process, and some of that could be extremely useful to our young people, and not just the young people who want to access education in whatever form. And a lot of retraining needs to be done, people going back into the workforce, all these different types of needs. I mean, some people are going to need creches, some people are going to need escorts, depending on their age or their abilities. So I think this cross-fertilization that we're seeing begin with the GCP consultation process, which has been grueling, but very informative for a lot of the people involved. We're all having our eyes open to different things. We can build on that for Cambridgeshire Skills, I'm quite sure, and enable that to help the more outlying areas. Postcode mapping is so important. People are coming in from all over to Addenbrooke's. I would certainly have no intention of having screeching to a halt at any district council boundary, I hope.
Thank you. Philippa, Alex, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. As English lessons were mentioned, I want to raise a broader point on this because I'm quite concerned about the long-term funding and like the provision. So like, just for context, I'm chairing the South Partnership for ESOL provision, but I think like now it's okay and we're doing a lot of great work. However, we have the government changed some of the asylum schemes. So we do expect an increase in asylum seekers in our area because of the proposed move to the full dispersal scheme by central government. And of course, this year as well, we have the highest net migration on record. So Brexit went very well, but this will bring additional needs in our county. So I think we need to plan long term for especially English language support, because if we'll see an increase in asylum seekers because of the changes in the scheme currently, as well as, of course, the impact of the record high net migration of over 500,000 in the previous recorded year. And if this kind of continues around the same number, I think we do need to think about our English provision, how we reach different communities. And I want to comment on what Hilary has been saying as well. I found working with Cambridgeshire Skills really useful in my own division, translating some materials in Polish, in Romanian, and some of the community languages. So I do think we need to focus on this as an area and long-term planning, especially if we see a change in demographics, and we see not with the census how many changes are in it is the fastest growing county as well. So just something that I'm really grateful for the work that's been done on English language, but I think we do need to think about the funding long term and whether the central funding would be matched with the increase in the population and especially on the more vulnerable asylum seekers that we would expect ultimately in our county. Thank you.
I recognise everything that was just been said. Our ESOL, English for Speakers of a Language provision, has increased by 163% over the last 12 months. We are relatively lucky being in the combined authority in terms of ESOL funding. I've recently come from an area where we were funded directly by the Department for Education, but in Cambridgeshire, because of the combined authority, ESOL is free on demand, while in other areas it is means tested. So we're in a relatively good place. But in terms of funding, that's a conversation for the combined authority and the DFE to increase what the amount of the adult education budget they receive.
Thank you, Tom. Unless there's anybody else, I think we need to move to the recommendations. But thank you very much for all your answers today, and for all the work you're doing. And in response to Councillor Kindersley, there's no such thing as a silly question. So, well, yeah. Yours are definitely not silly. They're very everyone's are very helpful. Thank you. So we'll move to the recommendations. We have 3 of them. I'll take those on block, but we do need to nominate somebody to be our representative on the Cambridgeshire Skills Advisory Board. Hilary.
And I would like to propose nominating Tom as representative on the Cambridgeshire Skills Advisory Board.
Thank you very much. I thought you liked me more than that, and I'm not going to say that. I do apologise. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. No, it's very good, and I appreciate the work that Tom is doing. They're doing a fabulous job. So I don't see any dissent. So we're happy to accept those recommendations unanimously. Thank you. Thank you very much. They are approved. And now we'll move on to item 7, which is the Cambridgeshire Registration Service Annual Report. And Peter, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Also, you've had the reports. I'll just pick out some highlights for you, and then there's also, if there's any questions, happy to pick those up afterwards. I think one of the major things I'd like to highlight is the fact that we're finding Sir Roger Ascham. So this is something we've talked about for many months, and it seems to have been a really long journey, but we're finally into our new building, and it is a much better facility inside for our team. We've been able to design it to really work, both in terms of ceremonies inside, but also for appointments. So we've got the space to be able to handle people in a sensitive way in many cases, because obviously with people coming for deaf registrations, it's quite a difficult time. We've also got as far as environmental credentials, we've designed it in that respect. So as the authority moves forward, we're very much concerned around the impact we have on the environment. Those thoughts are very much part of the work that's taken place in fitting out that building, which I'm pleased to say. We moved in as far as our appointments in September, and then our ceremony function joined in October. The only area that we'd like and still have some ambitions really in relation to the site is what we would like to do in relation to the outside area. There were really tight planning restrictions in relation to the facility. It's a listed building and we've had to work within those requirements. Also, it was important that we make sure that as a facility and the operation of it, it's something that works for the community and it's not something that the community then find is a challenge, is a problem, is causing a nuisance. So with that in mind, I think what we've been doing is making sure that we've worked really closely with local residents and the school, and that has worked really well. But certainly what we'd like to do outside is to develop more the open space area from a visual perspective, and what we can do again to help with regards to things like the photographers and the pictures and things that will happen outside. We haven't got the mound that we had in the last location. And so I think there's further work to be done there. I think the aim is to go back with a sort of a further planning request in order to make some changes, but with the support of the local community behind us. And I think that is the best way we'll get the changes that we like. Fortunately, Councillor Cox-Condren has been out to have a look at the venue. It's within her patch, which has been really fantastic. And I know we've been able to link up with some local artists and starting to make inside the building as well something that the community own and the community feel they've been part of and contributed to. So I think that's one of the real successes, but I think it's taken a long while to get to where we are, but it's certainly some really good news. Other changes I wanted to highlight is the fact we've now been able to bring the large group citizenship ceremonies into this building. It's taken a while to do, and I know certainly Councillor Kindersley has been involved in that, and thank you very much for your feedback. It's certainly really helpful to get that. There's been a bit of a learning curve again coming back in here with a few tweaks we've needed to make to get it to where we need to be, and I think the input from members has been really helpful in that respect. We certainly had some concerns expressed prior to coming back into here as far as sort of parking provision. We've not had, to be honest, a huge amount of concerns raised by those that have visited. We thought there may be some concerns about accessing the site, being slightly out of Huntington, but they haven't materialised in any numbers at the moment. We'll clearly keep an eye on that to make sure it's working for everyone. One of the areas that I know Councillor Batchelor raised previously, sort of moving on, is in relation to capacity to meet some of the needs of our external partners, if you like, that have got wedding and ceremony venues, as around the ability for us to provide sufficient ceremony officers. And I know it's something that you're keen that we looked at to make sure we've got sufficient capacity coming through. And I know last time I said it was a challenge, and we're regularly out to recruit as other jurisdictions. What we have done during this period is reviewed and benchmarked the job descriptions that we had, and as a result of that there has been an uplift to the salaries of those staff, and that has helped us in our recruitment. So we are still regularly going out to recruit, but I'm pleased to say that we have the numbers that we need at the moment, and that was a sort of a timely reminder as to keep an eye on making sure we've got that support, because we want to support the local economy. What we don't want to be doing is venues that have an opportunity to put on events that support not just those that will attend, but the economy of all those affected by not having the facilities and the resource to support them. So I'm pleased to say that's been a success as well. One of the things that as a group we identified previously would be really helpful is to have a forum in order to get more input from members like yourself, not just at committee, but through sort of a focus group. And we've had a meeting earlier in the year, at the end of September, and we've identified 2 priority areas initially to focus on. So it's not saying these will be the only 2, but 2 that we'll focus on initially, and they will then be the subject of a wider stakeholder group, so inviting parties in. So those 2 areas, one is around marketing. So this again is recognising not just some of the functions of which people pay for, so the ceremony side for ourselves is important to the council, but it's also important, as I suggested earlier, to many businesses across Cambridgeshire. And what we want to do is to make sure we're working in collaboration with them to make Cambridgeshire a destination of choice for people. People want to come for their ceremonies. So that working with them, I think we can make sure that we shape the service. We're offering the facilities, the times within the legal framework, but actually there's always scope around what we can do, and making sure we're fit for purpose going forward. So that's what that will do, is one of the groups. The second is really recognising we're in some very challenging times financially, and I know a number of the discussions earlier today will have picked up on sort of the hardship that people are suffering at the moment due to financial climate and going through. And we recognise as a service, we are blessed to have locations across the county. We touch many people throughout their lives as far as a service. And we want to make sure that through talking to partners, voluntary groups and a whole range of others, that we are doing all we can through not just the use of those facilities, some of which we co-locate and share with things like the library service, but making sure not just from our venues, but from our staff, we're looking out for signs of hardship, making sure people have access to the support that's available, looking for early intervention opportunities around people that may be looking like they're going into a crisis, to see what we can do to help get the support to wrap around them. We certainly haven't got all the answers, and this is early stages, but there's a role for us to play there. And that's not just for now during what is a challenging winter, but we see there's a role for us going forward. And that's sort of the added value that I think as a service we need to be offering. And that's something really my commitment, that we're going to help use one of these groups to ensure that we've got all the ideas to help us put the things in place that are really going to make the most difference. So I'm conscious really that's just picking out a few bits of the report, but very happy to answer any questions in relation to any other elements. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Any questions, Claire? And then Claire.
Thanks very much for the report. I just want to check whether the changes in accommodation have helped the sharing of space in the archive centre, because the archive search room has been used as a venue for ceremonies, and I just want to check where we are with that.
She's talking about the Ely facility. The change actually has no impact on Ely at the present, because this is in relation to purely the Cambridge office. So Ely is still a facility that we are using for registration sort of services.
Can you just indicate how long that will be, because it is actually an archive search room, which means that it can't be used as an archive search room on the occasions when it's used for ceremonies. Thanks.
The decision around using that facility was one that precedes myself. I'm not aware, and being honest, of the history, but the decision was made presumably by a predecessor around using that facility for dual use. So the discussion about that not being a dual use is not one that is happening that I'm aware across the organisation. So if the concerns in that respect, it's not one that's come to me from the management of the archive service to explore a new facility. If there is generally a challenge there, that's something clearly need to discuss with other directors, but also the property team, to see actually is there a better opportunity. I mean, the reason the team came into there to start with, I think, was a financial one as well for the local authority. We were operating out, I understand, of another building previously, and I think the finances at the moment are probably balanced around the council co-locating its services in that location. So there's a compromise, no doubt, but there isn't currently a piece of work looking around moving and changing those arrangements.
Just to add to that, we're happy to get you a note on the archives service perspective of that. Of course, there's been a bit of a modal shift post COVID anyway, where more and more people do searches online rather than face to face. But we can go back and just check what their perception of the impact is.
Thank you. Anybody else with any questions or comments? Sebastian and then Hilary.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. A super report. I think I mentioned bureaucracy earlier on, and one of the things that comes very clearly from the work that we've been doing around registration service is that there is the most unbelievable amount of bureaucracy, but that it is all entirely necessary, which is an element of some frustration, I think, with members. And, you mentioned that you are dealing with people, at points in their lives which are very special. So you do have to have very special people running through a whole load of red tape in order to come up with a result that is beyond satisfactory, because no one wants their wedding ruined. No one wants to be devastated registering a death or disappointed registering a birth. So there are a couple of things that I just draw the committee's attention to, and I guess it comes down to money, because this does actually earn money for the council. and therefore, we charge ratepayers less. And one of the points that is often made is that the statutory fees that are charged are fixed by government and haven't changed for years and years and years. Now, that's great if you happen to be the person paying the fee, but effectively that's a subsidy on the service that we could ill afford. And I know that that there has been quite a lot of pressure put on Treasury to actually sort this out. And anything further that the committee could do, I'm sure would be appreciated. And I end by saying that my involvement with the registration service initially started through citizenship ceremonies, and I do encourage members, if they have not attended a citizenship ceremony, to do come along, because they are unbelievably life-affirming and just very lovely events when we welcome anything between 20 and 30 new citizens every week to Cambridgeshire. And, a lot of people have gone through a lot of difficult times to get to that point. And we talk about openness and transparency and being welcoming county and all the rest of it. And that is actually that in action. So do, if you haven't been to one, to come. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Sebastian. They have to do a lot to get to that point as well, don't they? Yeah, I took the UK citizenship test, and you won't be surprised to hear I actually failed. I passed the USA one with flying colours. Just the nature, isn't it? But nature of the process sometimes, Hillary.
Thank you, and thank you for that report. As you said, the Roger Ascham building is in my ward, and working closely with officers over the last few months has really opened my eyes to the depth and complexity, not just of the bureaucracy, but also, as you say, as that person-to-person connection, and recognizing signs, for instance, of forced marriage or of isolation, and then being able to, in your words, deliver that wrap-around crisis support. It's huge. And so thank you to the officers for doing that. Also, it's been really good to talk to staff there and hear how happy they are in that building. And a huge credit to you, because, not just that move, but that transition coming after COVID and all of that stress. I mean, that's such an accomplishment. So I just wanted to recognise that. I also just wanted to flag up some of the something in the report around being able to register more online or by telephone, I understand, which I welcome for environmental reasons, for access reasons, but also just wondered about how that will, how that wraparound crisis support, how people will recognise, how your staff will recognise some of the issues if if people are registering online or by telephone. Also, just around Cambridgeshire Archives, the documents here that you have around what was going on during COVID are really insightful. And Claire, we were at the Cambridgeshire Archives meeting recently, and it's just a reminder how important it is to archive these documents, actually, because they really tell a story and are really important to be able to refer back to, I think, as well. Thank you.
Yeah, just to come back on the access provision, yes, the ability to be able to access the service through various means, and certainly when deaf registrations during the height of the COVID were able to do via telephone, that did help a lot of people, and we certainly welcome for a whole range of reasons the choice and the flexibility, not just environmental reasons, but to be able to have that again. And obviously there's legislation going to put that back. But I think you've highlighted a very important point, is at a time when we're looking out for signs of people that are struggling. It is far easier to recognise that unless if you see someone in person, because sometimes it's the way they hold themselves that sort of indicates a concern or worry and the behaviours. So I think phone call, it may be more difficult, and I think will be the case. But I think we can, in a lot of things we do, I think we can learn a lot by understanding behaviours and how people respond. And I think as a service, any service, to be honest, I think there's more we can do with staff to understand and recognise some of the signs that may prompt you know, a conversation which isn't intrusive, but actually gives someone an opportunity to highlight a concern or the trouble. So something that doesn't, it's not threatening, but engaging in a way that they feel like they open up a bit more, that then helps us identify whether there's something happening. So I think we certainly need to learn how to best to deal with that. To be honest, with as I say, with early stages, but I know there's certainly be others across the organisation that more engaged, perhaps through Adult Social Care and others in those type of difficult challenges and how to tease some of those things out, because people are very proud and people don't like to admit they're having difficulty. You know, and we're all in that boat at whatever point, and so it's how we can do that in this safe environment and safe way for them. But I think it's a really important point, and we need to put some attention to that to make sure that we don't lose a whole group of people that are accessing this via phone, and that's because in some cases they may not be able to leave the front door, and we need to see what we can do about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. I think at this point we will go to the recommendation, which is just to note the updates from the registration service. But thank you very much for all your work and for being here today and taking questions. And thanks to members for their contributions. So we're happy that we've updated or noted that updated report. Yeah, thank you very much. So we'll go on to item 8, which is the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Trading Standards Annual Report. We'll hear from Jackie Harvey. You won't be surprised to hear behind schedule. So we will take a break after this item. Jackie, thank you.
Morning, everyone. Thanks for speaking to us today. So I think you've probably seen our report. I'm hoping you can hear me. It's lit up. Just a few sort of key issues, a couple around funding that are positive. So you'll see in the report in 2.1 and 2.12, we talk about primary authority work and tackling crime and clawing back proceeds of crime. So over the last year and moving into the next year, the primary authority work that the team do is in excess of 120 businesses. So those are local, national and international businesses, which brings and generates income and helps support them to be regulated well. So that helps to underpin the service. And also tackling crime and clawing back proceeds of crime. So we're focusing on very rogue traders. So in the last year, we've dealt with a gang of plumbers that you'll see in this report, but the detail of that is people that were targeting vulnerable individuals, taking money up front and not delivering services. That person was convicted, and we've been able to succeed in taking £45,000 worth of proceeds of crime back from that business, that group of people. Moving into next year, we've got another plumbing case at the moment, an individual that operates in Huntingdon and Fenland. There seems to be a thing around plumbing. That person has got approximately 11 to 14 victims, mostly elderly or disabled, asking for wet rooms, those types of work. That's moving forward so that we can seize that trading and seize all his assets to look at POCA funding as well. That involves two individuals that are targeting the most vulnerable in the community across Cambridgeshire. You'll be aware that avian flu has been a major issue for most of us, particularly in Cambridgeshire, and that's had a devastating impact on commercial breeders in Huntingdon, Fenland, in those areas where they've lost large stocks. We now have a national housing order, which means that those commercial birds are housed, which means they're less likely to be infected by wild birds, which is where a lot of the population is affected. That continues. This time of year, product safety is of paramount. There's lots of people with the cost of living and fuel poverty are really struggling with costs. So we've done a lot of work, huge case over mobility scooters and safety issues. So there's a huge importation of, I think, 75,000 mobility scooters that came into Cambridgeshire that have had an issue through some sort of EU negotiations, but are almost resolved. So that's a positive outcome for the last year moving into next year. Food safety and standards is really high. You'll be probably aware of Natasha's law. So allergens is a really high demand area and a really keen. Had a couple of fatalities, one in Cambridgeshire, one outside of Cambridgeshire, but not linked to the products that they were purchasing. But it does highlight the work of the team. So we've put that as a priority for the next year moving forward. They're probably the main things. Recent prosecution in animal welfare was of an individual that's been running for a couple of years. Some of you may have heard about the case before.
Parker was convicted, he's waiting sentencing, and has also been convicted by Suffolk County Council for fraud offences. So the linking up of the business and the partnerships and the negotiating counties is really, really, really helpful for us as a department. It means that traders don't move in and out of county without being found. So that's kind of a summary, but any questions that you've got for me, I'm here for you.
Jackie, I've got Ian, Sebastian, and then Hilary.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I would like to take this opportunity of thanking Trading Standards because of the avian flu outbreaks in Northamptonshire, which, you know, a 3-kilometre exclusion zone comes into my county division, and I know the residents in my 2 of them villages, Winwick and Great Gidding, were very thankful for the work that you have done with them. It helps to alleviate fears, but it also, you know, we can make sure that we're not got the disease spreading. So thank you very much for that.
Ian, Sebastian, you're next.
Thank you. It's a really interesting report. I was quite surprised when I was asked by a resident to report uncovered chickens, that there was no way of doing it by email. And I wondered if this was a conscious decision, or was I just being very dim again and unable to find the right response mechanism?
I would say no to being dim. I would say that that's led by DEFRA and the APHA, so the Animal Plant Health Agency. So the reporting of birds outside that are flying. Racing pigeons is a very common one as well. They're allowed to fly for an hour a day, but remain housed. I'm not quite sure how we stop them associating with other birds. But most of the reporting comes through DEFRA and the APHA, but that system then does revert to trading standards and we become aware fairly soon. So if there was an outbreak declared affected birds this evening, we would probably know by 7 o'clock in the morning, if not overnight. So we have an alert system. So I think that helps us maintain the volume of work so that we can focus on the task. But Peter might want to add.
Yeah, just to add that, I think you're absolutely right that there isn't a simple system to report things other than so the numbers that are there, which you know it is quite difficult. So I understand there's been a sort of parliamentary debate, I think probably in the last week, discussing avian flu, and I think part of the focus of that was around the national bodies probably being largely reactive to what has been happening, with them very much wanting to be up front and more preventative in relation to setting up the arrangements to deal with it. And I think it's caught a lot of people out this year. Just the scale of the outbreak is far bigger than there's ever been across the UK and Europe. And I think to that extent, some of the things you're talking around, which in low numbers were probably not a problem being reported previously, have been problematic this year because the infrastructure behind to support that reporting has not been in place. And I think that's the sort of thing that's been teased out through debates recently.
So thank you for that. That's very interesting. So I take it from that actually members of the public snitching on their neighbours who have uncovered chickens are not welcome by trading standards. You're relying on, you know, rather more important methods. But it does raise the issue in my mind. We have on Cambridgeshire County Council website a very useful interactive reporting tool for highways. And I always think that the districts should be encouraged to join in so that we can report fly tipping on the same website and it just goes automatically to the districts. And I do wonder if there is something for trading standards to look at there so that residents can just, you know, go and highlight on the map and say what it is they want to say. You know, all of these things mean much less faff for everyone involved. Anyway, just a thought.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. Hilary, you're next.
Thank you. I would never have anticipated 18 months ago that when I get to the trading standards bit of the report, I get a little flutter of excitement because it's really where all the action is at, isn't it? It's excellent. And you talked about the proceeds of crime, Jackie, and I just wanted to also draw attention to how some of those proceeds are being used for training and apprenticeships for new staff, which is absolutely brilliant cycle. I think that's really exciting too. 2.4.7, you talked about producing food standards guidance packs, and this may of course already be a part of it, but I just wondered if there was any room there to incorporate, for instance, carbon reduction aims and environmental aims within those guidance packs. And lastly, Alex and myself go to the Cambridgeshire Young Farmers meetings monthly, and I'm sure this would be a really interesting topic to invite you to talk on. Thank you.
Thank you, Hilary. I hope you're not too overexcited by this. I mean,
I was quite excited,
well,
but
that's
I
good,
don't get out anymore.
almost as excited as Councillor Kindersley was earlier with the chickens. Anyway, Philippa.
Yes, I think glad you're having a break so she can calm down. No, seriously, she's right. All human life is here. And this, is decentralizing sort of mindsets in action, and it's bureaucracy in the service of humanity. And some of these things we want to be decided by somebody else a bit further up because they can take the flak. And we all know what those sort of things can be. But it does mean then that officers on the ground have got a framework of regulations they can point to, they can enforce. And with the sort of people skills I'm sure they have already or acquire, try and resolve the situation. But also because it's local teams who may well know that particular chicken farmer or whatever, and may or may not believe what they say and have reason. Seems to me the way we need to do local government. And I hope we can, as councillors, be involved as much as possible. And if we can tweak the system, make it a bit easier to report things and share information, that's all good. But try not to excite Councillor Cox-Condren too much.
Agree with that.
Thank you very much. Is there anything you wanted? I think, oh, sorry, Claire, apologise, sorry.
Thank you. Two comments. One is that there are a couple of good examples here of working with districts, and you mentioned the district licensing team under the illicit tobacco case, and also on the petrol forecourt safety, the environmental concerns there. So that's good. That goes back to what we were saying earlier in the meeting. My specific question is, if something was going on in our divisions, would we be told, or is it kept confidential?
So I can come back on a few of those. So in relation to being told, yes, you would be at the conclusion, not during the investigation, because unfortunately the intelligence control is quite important to succeed. So you would be made aware. In relation to sort of Hilary's comment about apprentices, part of that is to ensure that we keep that local consistency, because we do have some fantastic officers in the service. I'm very proud to have them in the team, but there will be a few years hence when they may not be in the team, so we need to build our own and make them aware of those communities. Actually, some of the sort of less experienced officers for the avian food projects actually stumbled across a couple of poultry farmers that were known by the APHA but have low-level stock, so 5,000 birds, and actually had 20 to 40,000 birds. So it's about, but that was linked to local intelligence, as you mentioned, so people know in the area, in the district. We've got somebody in our team who keeps poultry themselves, so they've got their eye to the ear literally everywhere of where those things are. But bringing in the apprentices will help, and it'll also help us focus on the public health work that we're doing with county in relation to the whole county into illicit products such as vapes, which is very prevalent in the younger ages between 16 to 35-year-olds, because they're, believe it or not, very expensive. So buying a fake one that's dangerous and is going to affect your lifelong health is far cheaper.
I just might also comment on that. So I think the comment in relation to would members be advised, I think there's two elements there. So one is in relation to a criminal investigation where potentially somebody could be taken to court. I think we're very sensitive around that, quite understandably. But there'll be other things, whether initiatives, other pieces of work, where actually as a local council you want to be supporting, you want to be involved, you want to be aware, and those are things understandably. So there is a divide. Actually, it's not just a hard rule in one or other, but it depends on the nature of it. So it could be a campaign, for example, that as a member you want to be supporting. Avian flu is a farm one actually, where we've worked closely with local councillors that have been disseminating information using their connections within the communities, which is really valuable to us. So doing that in isolation would just not be right. So we do engage. And then the point raised by Councillor Condron earlier in relation to the information we put out in guidance, and can we put in other information into that, such as carbon reduction and suggestions and advice? Well, absolutely. Those sort of conversations are ones that we have. We very much must ensure that we're not blinkered in what we do. We're representing the local authority. There's a lot we have responsibility for in the wider sense, and the huge amount of opportunities there to make sure we're maximising what we can do and the outcomes from our work. And there's a huge amount of work goes on with public health, actually, and around health inequalities that we increasingly are linking into. And that work, we're doing a lot of work with on sort of food standard, linking in with schools at the moment and education teams. So there are always more opportunities, and we're keen to make sure we don't miss them. So that actually is a conversation we have been having.
Ros, you're next.
So what Councillor Kindersley said about reporting scams is so important. I mean, it's a while back, but my mother, God rest her soul, she was scammed by some builders in Glasgow, and she lived in Sawston, and I was so angry, and I was definitely going to do something, but I was really busy, and then I didn't know who I reported it to. Do I have to call up someone in Glasgow? I don't know how it works, and I was so angry, and then I didn't do anything. And getting that reporting bit right is so important. I still don't really know, where do I look? Do I look at the county council website? I just think the more times we can report that and really thinking about that and making it clear what happens when it is outside the county, how those things work is really, really important.
If it's helpful, I can add a bit of clarity to that. So nationally, they set up consumer advice service. So it's called CITAE. It's run through the Citizens Advice Bureaus. And that replaced something that existed with local authorities probably about 10, 12 years ago now. And what used to be is a pottery postcode lottery around service delivery in the past, because it was never a statutory service of the local authority providing sort of consumer advice. So effectively, the government has set up these national call centres. What will happen if you ring those, and it's centralised number wherever you are in the country, you will get, first of all, advice on how to what support is available, because often if you've got problems with goods or services, often they're civil in nature. So there's not a criminal element, but actually you need to know how to get a redress. This is broken, that doesn't work. Someone hasn't turned up, they said they were going to come this morning. What do you do? So in essence, they provide all that support. But what they also do is take down the data. So there are arrangements in place for data sharing with all local authorities. So data which is relevant. So if there's a matter, somebody lives in Cambridgeshire but bought something in Scotland, then information still gets sent to the relevant local authority who's responsible for that business. Now, that information can either be for intelligence. So if it's purely civil, they'll see that, so they can see from a sector perspective. Actually, we've had X amount of people with problems in relation to second-hand car sales in this geographical area, which is quite helpful and useful, because even if there's not a criminal element, there may be work to be done with that particular trade sector in relation to them better understanding what their civil obligations are to consumers. So that's useful to us. But there will be other cases that are referred to as with a potential for a criminal investigation, so that there are elements that the advisor has some concerns about based on the remit of trading standards or another provider, and those are ones that you would look at to assess whether there's a criminal element, and then make direct contact with the consumer. So the consumer would be asked about, they come up with details being shared, so that information is obtained at the time. So that, in essence, is where you could go for any consumer problem initially. Also for scams, you could go to the National Call Centre Action Fraud. That's set up within the police setup. If I'm being honest, they tend to deal with high level fraud. So your individual that's a relatively low sum in the national context is a huge amount for someone who's could be retired on a low wage. It really matters. They may not pick that up. So that's the sort of thing for that support through the CITAE Citizens Advice Network will help feed them in contact with those that can talk to them. So the real concern with victims, certainly when they get more elderly, is their ability to remain independent in their homes. And often scams, if they become repeated victims, that can often be the thing that the next event is them then having to go into care, which is not what they want, and it's a cost to the wider sector as well. So we're very keen to ensure that where those things take place, that there is support, where they may already have carers going in, linked through to adult social care. And are there, from a trading standards perspective or policing perspective, are there those criminals out there that are still going around harassing and preying on people? And those are, it's where the harder end that links into the scams work, trading standards get involved in it, trying to prevent and disrupt that illegal activity targeted at vulnerable people.
Thank you very much, everyone. So we'll move to the report recommendations, and thank you, Peter and Jackie, both of you, which are to note the performance of the Trading Standards Service over the previous year and comment on the priorities for the service looking forwards, which I think we've both done very comprehensively. Is everybody content with that? Any dissent? No? Okay, thank you. We've been going for a bit over 2 hours. I've got just before 12:10 on my clock, so shall we meet back here about sort of 12:25 and reconvene? Yeah, thank you. Excuse me, which is the Library Service Annual Report. Gary.
Apologies, I was on mute there. So good afternoon. This report provides Cosmic with an annual update on the activities and performance of the library services in 2022 through the lens of key topics considered by the library's cross-party working group, which was established, can we believe, a year ago in December 2021. Cross-party working group has proved to be a valuable space to examine in more detail the issues, challenges and opportunities facing the service. And the terms of reference for the group are included at Appendix 1, and the report recommends that the group continues in its existence in 2023. The overarching narrative of the report is one of service recovery, as well as examples of creative responses to challenges and important successes in securing external funding to both maintain and develop important elements of our offer. Performance. The library service is making good progress in its post-pandemic recovery journey against all three of the KPIs agreed at the December 2021 Cosmic. These KPIs capture quantitative performance, but in addition, the service is working with services across the East of England and the University of East Anglia to develop a framework for capturing the impact that our services make, something that's really missing. And that project has a three-part focus, looking at digital inclusion, health and well-being, and children's literacy. Income and finance. Post-pandemic, the service faces financial challenges, and following a review, an action plan has been developed, shown in Appendix 2, and shared for detailed consideration at the cross-party working group. The plan includes refining, improving our venue hire offer, reviewing our own systems and processes to maximize income potential, improving the marketing of the service, an area for development, reviewing our partnerships, including friends groups and other public sector providers. And long-term, it's focused on ensuring that we have diversity and resilience in our income streams and not an over-reliance on one or two. This report requests Cosmic to endorse the library's income generation action plan. Funding is coming to an end for two important parts of our service offer: the Library Presents programme of cultural events and the Business and Intellectual Property Centre service, which supports startups and entrepreneurs. An awful lot of hard work and perseverance has resulted in funding solutions for both the TLP and the BIPC, securing them into 2023. I'm extremely proud of all colleagues involved in that. And this report requests Cosmic to endorse the future delivery plan for the Library Presents going forward. Everyspace is another externally funded project detailed in the report, and I'm happy to report that this library's improvement funded scheme is progressing to schedule in Cambridge and March. Another topic considered by the cross-party working group was the mobile library service, which has a unique reach into hundreds of communities in the county. Changes have been made to increase efficiency and to ensure that the routes reflect new communities and opportunities. 21 new stops have been added. The distribution of stops is shown in Appendix 3. 2021 also saw the introduction of book bikes, which were used at events to promote the service, a fantastic idea which came directly from the mobiles team themselves. Very, very conscious of time, so this concludes the brief outline of the report, but myself and Andrew are very happy to take questions and hear your observations.
Thank you very much, Gary. Any questions from members? Sebastian and then Hilary.
Thank you, Chair. Not actually a question, but more a couple of comments. I don't know if it's just me, but I do feel that the library service has just an amazing PR department somewhere, because it is the service that I think I get the most emails from and about, and that is absolutely splendid, because when I come across the mobile library van in East Hatley, which is possibly one of the very smallest communities that you serve, it always cheers my heart, because when I've been into the mobile vans, particularly at events such as Pride in the summer, I've been impressed by two things: the sheer overwhelming enthusiasm of library colleagues actually in the mobile vans and around them, and on the bike as well. And secondly, the very enthusiastic reaction of the public to that enthusiasm. So I want to take this opportunity to say, you know, bravo, everybody, and please do say to library colleagues what a fabulous job they do. And I think that I speak for a lot of my residents when I say that.
Thank you, Sebastian. I don't think it's just you. I agree. I think they do a fabulous job. I'm like to hang out in Huntingdon Library quite a bit. Sometimes they even let me in. They're very, very good staff, very good service, absolutely. So we'll go on to Hilary and then Claire.
Thank you. And I'm also starting with a hooray and fantastic. Thank you, Gary. So I just want to say a little bit about the Library Presents and how thrilled I am that funding has continued as well. Library Presents has been running for the past 5 years, and I've known it as an audience member, a participatory artist, and now as chair. So, you know, I'm really passionate about it and how it enables culture and diversity and representation and storytelling and reflection and all those wonderful things to come into our libraries and be within communities. So I just really want to implore all members to share that there's a call out at the moment from Library Presents for artists, and also to get more residents involved in feedback around what culture they would like to see in their communities. The second point, I'm really talking a lot today, I'm sorry, but the second bit is around some of the partnership working, Gary, and I just wondered what mechanisms are in place when looking at possible commercial partnership to ensure that commercial partners are sort of in line with our JA aims and ethos and you know, the community wealth building and everything else that we're trying to embed, please.
Absolutely. Just before I come to that, Hilary, if I just may thank councillors for the really kind comments about the service and service profile. Certainly when I joined Cambridgeshire just before the pandemic, I prioritised, you know, promoting the profile of the library service because I'm incredibly proud of it. I think it makes a massive contribution to people's quality of life in multiple ways. It has fantastic support politically throughout the organisation. So I was really keen that, you know, we had a narrative of success around the library service. And get fantastic support with them. And we make it a priority to get our message out there and tell our story to every audience. To your point, Hilary, around the commercial, I think this is something we do need to be mindful of. I think we are seeking to be opportunistic, really, given the financial pressures. So, and people will have different views. So just to give you one example, Barclays Bank. So Barclays, like many banks, are closing branches or have closed branches. So we took an opportunity to work with them in Wisbech to offer, you know, they were looking for a community facility to offer banking services 2 days a week. We recognise that many of our customers are not comfortable digitally, and they prefer face-to-face banking experience. So it seemed like a win-win there, an alignment with supporting communities, allowing the bank to operate on our premises to the tune of £11,000 a year. So on the back of that, I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with the person who's project managing Barclays operating in communities post closing their branches. This person is responsible for that project across the whole country. And obviously we're really, really keen to build on the success of the Wisbech pilot to roll out banking in other libraries, but not on an exclusive basis, I should say. You know, all banks are doing this, they're all closing branches for reasons we all know. So we will certainly work with commercial partners, because I do think there is an alignment between, you know, bringing those services to people in our county.
Thank you very much, Gary. Claire, you're next.
Yes, on the point of the mobile libraries, I think really important in encouraging children to read, and the excitement of when the van arrives and that they can go and change their their books. I think that's really good in rural locations. I also wanted to mention the importance of the volunteer libraries, for example, Fulbourn in my division, and the links that has into the library service, and the importance of keeping that going, recognising the value of the volunteers there, but also the input of the library service. And the importance of that for the summer reading challenge as well. And finally, just to comment on the working group that some of us are part of, and the important exchange that we have with you there, and really to recognise the innovative work that you're doing in not just commercial partnerships, but the Every Space project as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else at all, Ian?
Thank you very much. Yes, going back to with regard to the banking services, I wondered if you'd looked at putting banking services onto mobile libraries, because in my particular division, the banks in the rural villages are all shut now, particularly the one in Kimbolton, and it is not easy for the elderly to get to banks to do their banking services in some cases where they don't want to go online. So I just wondered whether you'd looked at that as a possibility going forward.
Not specifically in terms of the mobile library. I mean, the idea of banks operating out of our static sites is really aimed at addressing the issue you raised there around particularly older people less confident with doing online banking. I think a challenge in terms of the mobile library services that our stops are relatively short, and there's also a lack of privacy there. So I think I'm not sure that that model really translates to a mobile. I think it's more
Hi, Gary. So you went all Norman Collier on us there, and we could only hear certain parts of what you were saying.
Okay.
Want to just do that again?
Sure. Yeah. No, what I was saying was I think the banking offer lends itself to static sites better. I think that the challenge with mobiles is that our stops are relatively short. And so the opportunity for customers to interact with banking personnel at a mobile stop's pretty limited, really. It's also a lack of privacy. So we feel that we can meet that need more effectively within a static site in a building. Hopefully you heard me.
I did. We did.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hillary's got another question.
Just following up on it, really. I think that it's a real example of sort of some of the dilemmas that we face, really, when we are, so in need of bringing in extra resources and partnering commercially, but also, having to be very aware of promoting organizations which are investing in fossil fuels, and when we're in a climate emergency, and have the aims that we have. I don't know, I know that we have our triple bottom line way of working. Sorry, that wasn't a very good sentence. And also looking at donor economic models. I haven't got an answer there, Gary, just being being mindful of sort of contradictions and the difficulties that we face, really, and trying to align some of these issues. Thank you.
Yeah, just if I may on that one, I think the lack of exclusivity is important. So individuals make their own choices about who they bank with. So I think our approach is to offer them access to those banks through our libraries if they wish to work with us. Just a pragmatic approach. So we're not necessarily per se endorsing one bank over another.
Yeah, I think it's important to say other banks are available whenever we.
Absolutely, and we've certainly, in our discussions with Barclays, we've made it clear that this is not, and there's no exclusivity here. That we will work with other banks, and really interested in a news story recently about, I think it was HSBC, who were closing branches, pretty large scale closures. So we'll certainly be proactive in 23 and having conversations with other banks.
Absolutely, yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Gary. Sebastian.
Perhaps a timely reminder to members that most residents can undertake nearly all banking operations in post offices.
And other post offices are available as well. We've got to add a disclaimer. No, that's well done. Very good knowledge. I'm very impressed. A couple of questions for myself. Gary, we, as you know, well, your team are looking at project to improve digital skills, and you've already done some sort of pilot work, I think, with East Cams, or discussions there, and how we can broaden that throughout the rest of the county. So obviously, libraries have computers in them; they have Wi-Fi. When we had the combined authority meeting, I was a sub for somebody. So Councillor Anna Smith, as Deputy Mayor Molnick, is recovering, and she very kindly visited Huntingdon Library with me, and we had a chat with the team there just about the work they're doing. So I just wondered how you see that work developing. We're looking for funding from the CPCA, to put it bluntly. And the second comment, maybe you can come here, Andrew. I know we visited Arbury Library with the local ward member who's sitting to my right, and quite an interesting visit around that area. And I know you're doing a lot of improvements to that library, but thinking about perhaps do we try and find them a new headquarters? They're just across the road from, is it Cambridge North Cambridge College, Hilary? Arbury Library is just across the road. They don't have a library. Yeah, North Cambridge Community. They don't actually have a library, but of course we do across the road, but it's a very old building that needs a lot of improvement. So I think there's some potential there, obviously very difficult with the current budget climate.
Thank you, Tom. I'll let Andrew talk to the Arbury question. If I can just pick up the digital one. And firstly, thank you to you for your great interest in this as an issue, and also brokering conversations for us. So our view is, evidence-based view is that we know that there are many people in the county who have no or very low digital skills, and we also know that the absence of those skills is a great block on social mobility. There are so many negatives associated with not having digital skills, but actually there's a bit of a gap really in the market. So our colleagues in Cambridge Skills do obviously fantastic work, but that is more sort of accredited learning, a more formalized learning route. So our position is that actually there's a gap, which is a service which sits with people in libraries or in community settings, really sitting with a tablet and just teaching people the basics and giving people that level of confidence and that may be sufficient. They may subsequently go on to use online banking. They may then be able to talk to their family in Australia and so on. It gives you those sort of essential digital life skills, which may or may not lead to progression onto formal learning. But there is a bit of a gap there. And the meeting that you referred to, Tom, we've got a paper actually, which I'm going to send to you this afternoon, as it happens, and to the colleague at the CPCA, really to kind of scope out an offer, a funded proposal, to begin that conversation, which very much complements the Cambridge Skills offer. We've always been in this space. We've all free internet access is key part of our service. But we recognise that we need to do more than that, or there's a need to do more than that. And we have what we call this trinity of kit, connectivity, and skills. And without all three of those, you really kind of scuppered, I think, in terms of making a difference in this space. Andrew, are you happy to pick up the Arbury?
So yeah, Arbury Court's one of our busiest branches, and it was looking a little bit worse for wear after many years of heavy use. So I'm happy to say we have been investing some money to improve it in terms of giving it a coat of paint and new flooring. I think we do recognise the building is getting towards the end of its life. We are actively in discussions with the City Council around sort of any wider development of the area. I would say it's probably not imminent, but that conversation has started. In terms of North Cambridge Academy, we have had some very successful partnerships with them. Pre-pandemic, they were using the library as their library under a funded model for a while. Unfortunately, that did come to an end sort of early 2019. but we do still have that sort of line of communication, and they occasionally come along and do joint projects with us. So yeah, definitely things that we are exploring actively.
Thank you very much, both. Anybody else? No. Okay, so seems to be consensus in support of the 3 recommendations. So we're happy to carry those unanimously. So thank you very much, and thank you very much to both of you for your time and for all the great work you're doing.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And we'll move straight on to agenda item 10, which is the Innovate and Cultivate annual evaluation. If somebody could switch the lights on, that would be great. Brilliant. Thank you. Leanne, welcome.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see you all. I'll start by saying that I'll be leaving the County Council at the end of December and have enjoyed working with many of you over the past 5 years. I'm proud of what the Council's InvestorSave funding programme has achieved since it was launched in 2016, and this annual evaluation report offers a good opportunity to shout about some of those impacts that it's had on people and communities in Cambridgeshire. The report was prepared by myself, Cambridgeshire Community Foundation and the Fund Steering Group. Due to its brevity and its focus on the 21-22 evaluation period, this committee report really only skims the surface of what the fund has achieved. And had I known that the fund's future was uncertain, it would have been a different report. Nevertheless, here are some of the highlights of this year and also the fund as a whole. So I'm going to start with some numbers. At the time this report was written, the fund had supported 103 projects and committed £2,092,857 in grants awarded. In this annual evaluation period, 12 grants were awarded in the single funding round that was held in February, and 18 projects completed funding terms. For those 18 that completed their funding terms, a savings estimation has been made based on the outcomes that they achieved and the number and the type of beneficiaries that they've supported. So on an investment of £396,000, it was estimated that they'll offer a return on investment of nearly £714,000. That represents a notional savings of over £317,000. If we look at the whole funding programme, 55 projects including funding services, prevention and early intervention initiatives that support people to live independently in their homes and communities for longer, and they build community capacity and support networks. They're helping to avoid future cost escalations, and they're delaying anticipated increases in demand. The estimated return on investment on the £1,275,000 invested in those projects is nearly £2,257,000, shy thereof. That's a notional savings of nearly £982,000. Most of these projects are continuing to deliver beyond their funding period, so they don't just stop. So these savings are expected to continue into the future. The funding programme, as you know, underpins the Think Communities ethos. So as well as the positive impacts that the projects are having on their beneficiaries, which I've outlined briefly in 2.10, and in the case studies and feedback in Appendix 3, they're also encouraging opportunities for multi-sectoral partnership working, examples of which are included in Appendix 4. And they're increasing community-led activity and volunteering. Since we started collecting data on volunteering via the new online monitoring system that was introduced about 18 months ago, 16 projects have completed and submitted final monitoring using the system. And they have showed that for those 16 grants, those 16 grants have encouraged 258 new volunteers to come forward, and they've generated 9,079 volunteering hours. So if you scale up those figures to include all 103 projects, that's a lot of volunteers and hours created by these grants. I'm also going to highlight some of the trends we've seen over the years in relation to application success rates, areas of delivery and services supported. So application success rates have increased steadily since 2017. Back when we first introduced the Innovate and Cultivate Fund, only 28% of applications were successful at panel. That has now risen to, during this evaluation period, it's risen to 60% that are successful at panel. This is due in large part to improvements in communicating the aims and criteria of the fund, also by creating the Cultivate project models and guidance. But I think most importantly, it's through supporting the applications that the applicants who wish to apply for funding. So the pre-application advice appointments with service leads, those are key experts in adult social care, children and family services, and also on anti-poverty now. These appointments act to improve on the good applications, to make them better, and they divert applications that really aren't suitable to the fund. So the majority of organizations that seek pre-application advice are actually diverted from applying in the first place, and they're directed to other funding opportunities. They're also supported to link up with internal and external teams and networks and partnerships so that they can really get support elsewhere for getting their projects off the ground. The majority of organizations that are seeking advice and that do go on to submit an application are now successful in being funded. So for example, in this evaluation period, 29 organizations sought advice for that February funding round. 11 of those went on to submit applications, and 9 of those were funded. So I'm just going to move on to delivery area of funded projects. This has remained largely consistent over the years. The majority of projects that are funded are delivering in Huntingdonshire and Cambridge. That's followed by South Cambridgeshire and East Cambridgeshire, and then Fenland has the least number of projects delivering in that area. Many of those projects are delivering in more than one district. They don't tend to stick to county or to district boundaries. And a further minority of those larger projects, mostly the ones that were funded under the Innovate funding streams, are delivering county-wide. This pattern reflects the populations of those areas and also the concentration of VCOs that are based in Huntingdonshire, for example, and Cambridge. The fund has always focused on reducing pressure on the most costly council services. So children's services and adult social care is where we've primarily funded projects. So since 2017, 54% of projects have supported vulnerable adults, and 40% have supported vulnerable children, young people, and families. This year, we saw an increase in projects for young people. And this is largely a reflection on the enthusiastic take-up of the community youth worker project model, which has been really successful in bringing youth work to lots of communities that would otherwise not benefit from that support. We've also started supporting anti-poverty projects this year that are helping residents to cope with the cost of living crisis. The Innovate and Cultivate Fund was aligned to the priorities of the current council administration and relaunched as Cultivate CAMS in July this year. The changes that were made, I've outlined those in section 2.13, and the impacts of those changes will be reflected in next year's evaluation report. So it's a bit of a wait and see on that. Because we've made so many changes to the funding program over the past year, this current report does not put forward any new proposals for change in 23-24 and is intended to be for your information only. So at this stage, I will ask if you have any comments or questions.
Thank you very much, Leanne. And just to say, we'll certainly miss you. Thank you very much for all you've done. You've been absolutely great. Steve and then Hilary.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I've lived with this fund from the outset. I think Leanne and the report says it all, really, Chairman. It was set up as an investor save fund, and it still is an investor save fund. And it looks as if we may throw it all away, which is, a huge regret. I'd just like to say that thank you very much to Leanne for all the work she's done and how much I've enjoyed working with her over the years. Thank you, Leanne.
Thank you, Steve. I've really enjoyed working with you as well.
And also, Steve, thank you very much for the work you did when you initiated this, when you held this position. And I think I haven't seen all the various projects, of course, but certainly for my own patch, it's made a very, very big difference, very positive difference. So, Hilary.
Thank you. I'm really saying the same thing, saying thank you to Leanne. Cultivate and previously Innovate and Cultivate, I have also known for many years, myself now being on the steering group, but before then, you know, with years of working as a community worker, collaborating with many of the groups that have been supported through this and through your work too, Steve, thank you. And I've also applied for funding myself and been involved in delivering projects. So I have a very long and close history. It's galling, absolutely galling that we're in this position to be losing this service. The partnerships that have been developed, the connections and the learnings will continue. And thank you for them, and very best wishes, Leanne.
Thank you, Hilary.
Thank you, Ross.
Yes, thank you for this. The report demonstrates what great things can be achieved and how valuable funds like this are, but no one's throwing it away. There is no choice. There is a budget gap. There are circumstances beyond the control of the council, and there are circumstances that central government have forced upon us. We have got a massive budget gap. We don't have enough money. So we've got to make some very, very difficult decisions. And if we didn't make the difficult decision about this, it would be something else that would be equally as terrible to have to say goodbye to.
Well, I think it goes back to our budget discussion earlier, doesn't it? It's very sobering reading. And this is an example of something that's been excellent and may not be able to, well, won't be able to continue. Philippa and then Alex.
Thank you, Chair. I think this does also illustrate the usefulness of having partnerships and developing partnerships, so that when we as a county council sometimes regretfully have to withdraw, the thing doesn't collapse. I mean, it's been quite an interesting, I'm not a follower of Cambridge United. I used to look after somebody and was better informed because of looking after him. But on the other hand, they clearly are a force to be reckoned with, and almost an arm of government at the moment, insofar as they've taken it upon themselves to chair meetings and groups and reach out. And I'm sure that we as councillors will do everything we can to maintain what the relationships that we are aware of. But regret that we are not able to support them so well in the near future. So I'm very glad with our partners and what they do. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to say my thanks as well, like from my perspective as a local councillor in a division where one of those projects has been going on for quite some time, of course, with the Cambridge United Youth, especially working with young people and our local charity, Abbey People. I think the difference that such projects make to the community is really, really huge. And we speak about the savings that we make, but also in terms of like the social impact, the cultural impact, as well as the environmental impact of some of those projects, mixing youth with nature access as well as sport. So the implications on our health, for example, as well. I see it like really holistically, not only in terms of the savings, of course, that's like really an important point. And I just wanted to follow up from what was said around central government underfunding. I think already when we had funds like this, we are already addressing the underfunding of local authorities. So for example, in my case, I worked a lot on projects around outreach for immigration advice, EU settlement scheme. Already central government is delegating their responsibility into like outreach and community work that they're supposed to do, like in many ways. On, you know, for example, local authorities having small grants and having like, you know, small and medium funds. And of course, taking this away furthers the gap, because the gap is already there. It's not like now that we're making those decisions. Already a lot of the community projects are filling in gaps that used to be many decades ago, perhaps provided in other ways. And I have seen this like in terms of how immigration advice works, how so many volunteer hours and, you know, how many volunteer hours and unpaid hours are being being done by like just dedicated volunteers and community members who really wants to do what is right. And I think it's, you know, it's really sad we're in this situation that we have to further, you know, further reduce the funding and support that is for available for communities. But just want to make the political point that it hasn't started now or this year, has been a continuous I guess delegation of responsibilities of engaging with communities in terms of central government. So yeah, I'll stop on that one, but thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. So we'll go to the recommendation, which is to note and comment on the report, which we have done. And thank you, Leanne, for that. Everybody happy with that? Yep, agreed. Thank you. And then we'll move swiftly on to the endorsement of recommendations for Cultivate CAMS.
Okay, so the Cultivate CAMS recommendation panel met on the 22nd of November to consider the 24 grant applications submitted to the first round of the updated Cultivate CAMS fund. So as you're aware, the fund offers grants of £2,000 to £15,000 for projects that support vulnerable residents and build community support networks. This is the highest number of Cultivate applications submitted to a funding round to date. The outcome is that the panel is requesting that the committee endorse 17 grant applications for funding. If endorsed, this would represent a 70% success rate and would commit £205,308 in grants. The recommended projects are listed in section 2.2 of the report and outlined in further detail in Appendix 1. 12 of these projects sought formal pre-application advice on their proposal. A further 3 projects are recent grant holders with a good understanding of fund criteria and priorities, and the final 2 projects had not sought pre-application advice. But this goes with the trend that I mentioned in my previous paper, that the majority of these applications that are coming to us that get through the panel have had a lot of support with developing their projects and proposals. If endorsed, these 17 projects would bring the total number of funded projects in the Council's Invest to Save programme to 120 and will represent a total grant commitment of £2,298,165. If we take into account the projected administration fees for the current funding programme, this will leave at least £163,000 of the 2022-23 allocation for the scheduled December funding round. This remaining amount is an underestimate. I just wanted to point that out now, as I'm currently working with Cambridgeshire Community Foundation to account for any underspends relating to projects that were withdrawn or completed early over the past months.
Hi, the audio is not working too well. Could everybody hear? Yeah, fading out a little bit. It's probably my hearing, but
so just my final point was that the amount that we should be able to carry forward should be about 184,000, which is higher than the amount in the report, just because we have had a couple of projects that have completed early or withdrawn. So that's all I have to say about that. If you have any comments or questions before we request endorsement of those 17 projects, fire away.
Thank you very much. So the panel included myself, Hilary, Steve, and Adela and Claire and Henry. It was a very thorough process. So anybody have any questions at all? No. Yeah, okay, thank you. So I think we're happy with those recommendations. Anybody indicate any disagreement with that? No. I don't think we do. No, I think was delegated, so we're sort of endorsing the recommendation. So that is approved. Thank you very much, Leanne, again, for all you've done. Appreciated by everybody.
Thanks very much.
Take care. Wish you best.
Bye all.
Thanks. Bye. Item 12 is supporting the rollout of repair cafes, upcycling and recycling and reuse initiatives.
Thank you, Chair. A relatively short report with a recommendation to fund by the way of a grant, a proposal from Cambridge Carbon Footprint, the detail of which is set out in Appendix 1. This action arises from a motion, a referral from full council. The number of considerations that officers took into account are set out at 2.1, including in trying to address the reference given us to council, including the budget position, which we mentioned on several occasions. The fact that many such initiatives, not only cross-county but cross-country, self-sustain. That Cultivate Cambridge, as we've just heard, is not really an option for a couple of reasons. One of which relating to returns on investment, because the tonnage of waste that repair cafes actually save isn't necessarily always great, and that was something that Cultivate Cambridgeshire had to take into account. However, what is less quantifiable but significantly important is the behavioural shift that repair cafes can help, and therefore the impact can be much greater than the individual waste saved by an individual repair cafe in that support to shifting people's attitudes and behaviours. Reflected that there is a flourishing movement already, especially in the greater Cambridgeshire area, and that an organisation, Cambridge Carbon Footprint, I just mentioned, has experience in this area, and indeed sets up, has set up a how to organise a repair cafe in your community guidance. On that basis, we did approach Cambridge Carbon Footprint to hold discussions. From those discussions, we were particularly thinking about capacity in areas of the county where repair cafes were not currently in operation, given the significant density in the greater Cambridgeshire area, to build that capacity on an ongoing basis, to recognise the support and capacity didn't lie within the council necessarily for that. And therefore supporting a decentralised approach by which communities could pick up and enhance and embrace the repair cafe movement within themselves. So the principles have led to the proposal set out in Appendix 1 that also recognises that the ongoing investment of this type is unlikely to be able to maintain, so therefore draws in our VCS support organisation, Support Cambridgeshire, who we contract with to provide wider support to VCS organisations, and therefore begins to talk about an identification of external funding for much more than the couple of repair cafes and the men's sheds that are outlined in this proposal. So we have some sustainability and continuity of this particular project. Hub to support a number of repair cafes that new and growing repair cafes can refer to. And as I mentioned, research on accessibility for longer term funding models that could support many more than the repair cafes than this proposal will directly be able to support financially. I'll leave it there, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Is Bryony Rothwell, is she joining us? Or... Are you out there, Bryony? Can you hear us?
I am. Sorry. Hello. I'm
Hi.
showing as Bryony Needham. Apologies, it's my married name. So I just wanted to support the recommendation from a waste partnership perspective. I'm the waste partnership manager for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and we are very supportive of these schemes to enable communities to do behavioural change, because obviously it makes them think very widely about what they're bringing into their homes, what they're consuming, and how they're treating the waste. And so it's an indirect impact on our service, because quite often we don't see the impact because they've stopped buying the materials and the waste before we actually have to deal with them. But anybody who has any engagement with the waste service in Cambridgeshire, it's a very expensive service, but you have a lot of waste that comes into Cambridgeshire. And obviously these kinds of schemes where you're engaging with the public to prevent that waste in the first place and to engage the public in thinking about what they're doing with materials at the end of their life, or whether they can repurpose them or repair them, is really vital. That's all I wanted to say.
That's great. Thank you, Bryony. Any questions, comments from members? Alex?
Thank you. I was looking at the proposal. I think it's really great, although it's a really big job to do, employing a 1.5-day outreach officer and focusing on like several areas. Yeah, I just wanted to, I think it works out at above living wage in terms of the budget proposal for the people who will be employed to do this. Just wanted to ensure that we are, ideally encouraging like living wage in terms of the project, and whoever will be employed in this project as well, because I know how difficult it is to make a funding bid and try to include so many things in so many places and trying to like factor in the staffing costs. So yeah, I was just looking a bit at the budget and I thought probably it works out at around that.
Thank you. Ros?
I just wanted to add that at the Environmental Green Investment Committee last week, we were presented with the annual carbon report. And for the county council, of our scope 1 to 3 emissions, scope 3, the emissions from third parties, are 95% of our emissions. And these 95% of the emissions, and out of the scope 3 emissions, 36% of those are waste. So basically a third of the county council's overall waste emissions are coming from waste. And when you look at the progress we're making over time in the annual carbon report, lots of things are reducing. We're doing really well on the schools heating programme. We're reducing the carbon that is going into the atmosphere from heating within schools by energy efficiency and by different types of heating. I think there's transport is difficult. That's not reducing particularly, but as we move over to electric vehicles, that will shift. But reducing the carbon footprint of waste is really, really hard. It does require everyone, it fundamentally requires a different way of living. It does require behavioural shift. At the moment, the district council and Peterborough Waste Services are writing the county's waste strategy. And what is clear in there is that it's not just about getting people to sort their recycling. It's about that behavioural shift. It's about how do we think far more carefully about what we do with waste. And repair cafes do play a role in this. Not only is it somewhere you can take your broken fan and see if you can get it fixed, but it raises the question in the community. Once you've got a repair cafe, you recognise there are people who can repair these things in your community. So perhaps on Facebook you say, oh, such and such is broken, the button's gone, and then someone else has got a solution. They provide a stimulus to begin that conversation, to make us think about things different, to make us talk about them, to make us use our materials and the things we have more effectively. And that's particularly pertinent during a cost of living crisis, when actually being able to use things for longer and being able to use them better is a really valuable thing we can do. It also makes us think more carefully about the things we're buying. If I spend a little bit more, can I get this thing which I can repair, and then it'll have a much longer lifespan? So I did, of course, I support this motion. I brought it to full council, but I absolutely support. I mean, I could talk about this and all the different aspects of it for the next hour, but I will stop there. I really support this and think it's a really positive move.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, you could speak for the next hour, but probably, I think it's going to be approved, so you'll be all right. Anybody else at all? No, brilliant. Well, thank you, Ros, for all the work you've done on this. You made this. Well, you repaired this, I don't know. So the recommendation is to agree to fund by way of a grant the proposal from Cambridgeshire Carbon Footprint as set out in Appendix 1 of the report. Are we all content with that? Yeah, that's great. That's approved. Moving on to performance monitoring report, item 13 for Q2. Paul. And thank you, Bryony, as well, if you're still listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This should only take about an hour and a half. So
okay, well, what's in that recommendation?
Members are reminded that the services for which committee now has responsibility now sit across two council directorates, both strategy and partnerships and place and economy. Obviously, if there are any questions regarding the particular performance service as indicated in this performance report, we may have to take those back. We've taken the decision not to have every officer sitting around this table for that reason. This is just the second presentation of the new set of key performance indicators, and presentation continues to develop based on feedback received, including after the last meeting of COSMIC. And this iteration therefore includes a performance summary section, which is set out at section 4 of the report. Section 2.2, I should flag, has a correction on a previous report, and section 2.4 flags that there are new baseline indicators for coronial services. What was called a red, amber, green rating or a RAG rating in previous reports has been changed to color coding because we do have red, amber, green, blue, and they're explained at 3.2. Still seems weird that we call them color coded and then print them in black and white, of course, but that is for accessibility issues. Maybe as some councils do, we could actually color code them as well, and that wouldn't impact on accessibility. That's something we'll take up outside the meeting. That said, I won't run through those performance summaries for individual services. I will just present the report to committee as written.
Thank you, Paul. Anybody wish to comment or raise any questions? Oh, looks like you're free there. Well done.
It's all down to the quality of the report, obviously.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thank you. We've been asked to note the contents of the report, which I think we're content to do, members. Yeah, noted. Thank you. Item 14 is the finance monitoring report for October 2022. Claire, your timing was perfect. You joined us just at the right moment. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got October's finance monitoring report to present to you today. Avid followers of the finance monitoring report might note that it's changed in format somewhat since last time. Because of the changes to the structure of the council, the services that come under the remit of this committee now fall across two distinct areas of the county council officer structure, if you like. So they fall across the strategy and partnerships and also in place and sustainability. So for that reason, what we didn't want to bring to you was two very full reports with a lot of detail about a lot of services which actually don't fall under your remit at all. So we came up with this format, which just takes out of those reports the bits that relate to your committee so that you're not wading through a lot of unnecessary detail. That's the first thing I wanted to say. I'm happy to take any comments or questions on that once I've been through the report as well as an issue, and if anyone doesn't like the new format or wants to make any other suggestions for the future, that would be fine. In terms of what we're reporting for the services under the remit of this committee, at this point in time, it's an overspend of 50,000, which was against the coroner's service. This report, obviously to the end of October, is just over a month old now. Work that's been done with the coroner service more recently is alluded to in the note that I put there in 2.2, which we're to the end of November report, the next one, which will come to you next time, is actually looking like it should be now a balanced position. So we're back to a balance there, which is good news. I also noted in 2.3, last time the finance monitoring report came to this committee, we said that there may be a future overspend to come forward on libraries, but due to some joint working with the adult learning, the CAM skills service that you heard from earlier, and some other increases in income, that hasn't come forward, and they are now at a balanced position, which is good news. So that's the revenue side. On the capital side, the main thing to report has already been discussed really in the business planning item, which is that the community capital fund will have a 1.7 million carry forward into the next financial year, which is a mixture of ongoing projects that have been delayed and projects that will be under the new scheme that was discussed earlier. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Claire. Anybody have any questions? We're all avid readers of the finance monitoring report, as we know, and we've read it so thoroughly that looks like we're all content. That's great. Thank you. So we're happy to review and comment on the report. Perhaps less comments, but we've certainly reviewed it. Thank you very much. I think we're all content with that, aren't we? Yeah. Agreed. Okay. And we'll conclude by looking at item 15, which is the agenda plan, committee agenda plan, which is Paul.
Nothing to add, Chair, apart from my note with need some clarification on why the annual report from the library service is still on there. There must be a reason, given we've just had it. I will come back and clarify that. We also do need to add what we proposed in the decentralisation paper, which is to bring back a full set of criteria and process for the new Cambridgeshire Priorities Capital Fund. Now that we've agreed, it will be aligned with the Care Together programme.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Anybody have any comments or questions on that last item? Steve, sorry, Steve. Yeah.
Do I take it we can take the 12th of January out of our diaries now, Chairman, if we're not leading the reserve meeting?
I think it's, well, you lead me to my next point. Yes, I don't think we'll be having a meeting on the 12th of January. It was reserve date. But just before we finish, this is Paul's last committee meeting. He'll be leaving us to spend more time with Brentford FC, among other things, I'm sure. So I think you'll all join me in expressing our deep gratitude and thanks to Paul for all the work he's done. He stepped into the breach during a very difficult period, and it's only, as we've seen, got even more difficult with all the challenges we face. But he's been a complete rock and been great to work with. I think we've all enjoyed working with Paul and many things that you've helped to bring about. But I'd particularly like to highlight the Household Support Fund, which I think has been fantastic, and the work you did with Anglian Water and Cambridge Water, which I think was a great initiative. You just mentioned the work you're doing with the Communities Capital Fund, some new ideas that you really came out with and initiated, among many others. So I don't know if somebody else wanted to just say a few words as well. Hilary, did you want to add a few words?
Oh, I hadn't prepared anything there, but thank you. The man in black who came in and you know, led us through this last few, you know, worked collaboratively with us and has led so much, in particular around community wealth building, I think, and drawing on Paul's expertise with that has been great. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much. I think we'll give Paul a little round of applause before we finish. All in clapping. Thanks for your endurance, everyone. I think we'll probably see each other all next week at Council. But if I don't, wish you a happy Christmas and New Year. Thank you.